Chapter 1676. Of course, Qian Xingbao wouldn't agree. Although he was very angry that the embroidered uniform guards didn't obey his nephew's orders. But if he had to kill them all because of this, he would not do such a thing. Therefore, the person who should be condemning him became the one who comforted him. Ayaya eunuch Mao, calm down, calm down. You can't do things like this. How can you fight and kill for no reason? Yes, I was too agitated. It's just that I really don't know about this matter. I've been taking care of the Empress for a while and haven't been to the brocade guard's yamen. If you don't believe me, Commander Qian, think about it carefully. Have you seen me in the past few days? Mao Mu knew that he had the upper hand, so he stopped and asked Qian Liang. Qian Liang thought about it carefully and found that it was true. He immediately replied, "That's right. I haven't seen eunuch Qian in the embroidered uniform guard these few days." "That's right. It's all a misunderstanding. However, it doesn't matter. I'll go to the embroidered uniform guard and gather those brats. I'll give them a good lecture and have Commander Qian give them a good lecture. What do you think, eunuch Qian?" Mao Mu seemed to be speaking in a submissive tone. What could Qian Xingbao say when he had such a proper attitude? He could only nod and say, "Since it's a misunderstanding, I've wronged eunuch Mao. Then we'll do as you say." "Thank you for your understanding, eunuch Qian." Mao Mu's body straightened at this moment. The atmosphere eased up a lot and the three people all had smiles on their faces. Since the atmosphere eased, there was no need to be so serious. Mao Mu said, "Eunuch Qian, Commander Qian, it's not difficult to deal with these embroidered uniform guards. You can do it from two aspects. The first is to give them money. With benefits, everyone will be willing to follow you." As he spoke, Mao Mu was still observing Qian Xingbao and Qian Liang's reactions. Just as he thought, both of them had a serious look on their faces after listening to him. Obviously, for misers like them, it was more appropriate for others to give them money. Asking them to take out their money and hand it over to their subordinates was even more unbearable than killing them. Mao Mu then continued, "If we don't give them money, then we can only take the second path, which is to display enough ability to intimidate them. Coincidentally, there is a matter that His Majesty has instructed me to discuss the issue of grain with Yang Xie. If this matter is done well, this merit will be enough to intimidate others, and we won't have to worry about the brocade guards not being obedient." Listening to Mao Mu's words, Qian Liang originally wanted to say that his ability was mediocre. It was too difficult to prove to others with his ability. But before he could say anything, he heard about the problem of food. He couldn't help but open his ears wide. At this moment, Qian Xingbao's expression turned serious. His intuition told him that this matter of food could be done. After all, it was part of the procurement process. As long as one was a eunuch in the palace or an official in the imperial court, who wouldn't know that when it came to procurement, there were always benefits to be gained. "Eunuch Mao, what exactly is going on? Tell me about it." Qian Xingbao took this to heart. When he asked about Mao Mu, his attitude became much more amiable. Mao Mu, who had been waiting for this sentence, explained the task that His Majesty had instructed him to do in detail. It turned out that ever since Yang Xie was assassinated in the capital and the imperial edict in Chao Jishiang's hands, although Yang Xie didn't declare war on the southern Ming Empire, he had been preparing for it. It was said that there were many official ships that went from Chichen City to Laizhou Prefecture every day, transporting all kinds of supplies before the war. Of course, the southern Ming Empire wasn't idle either. The Ministry of War began to deploy troops and the Ministry of Revenue began to prepare money and food. Here came the problem. In the past few years, because Yang Xie had poured large amounts of food into the southern Ming Empire, and the price was very reasonable, it heavily suppressed the local food industry. As a result, the more land the farmers planted, the more losses they suffered. Gradually, large amounts of land began to become barren, and the southern Ming Empire no longer had the ability to produce their own food. Now that they were about to go to war with Yang Xie naturally didn't want to sell food to the southern Ming Empire. Although in the past 2 years the officials of the southern Ming Empire had seen through the problem and increased the amount of food they bought, and they had accumulated some food. However, if they only sent out and didn't receive any food, they wouldn't be able to last for long. For the southern Ming Empire that was about to go to war, this was an extremely dangerous matter. The emperor saw the problem and handed the matter to the embroidered uniform guards, telling them to discuss with the officials of Yang Xie about the matter of purchasing food. After all, the two sides hadn't declared war yet, right? Moreover, in the previous negotiations it was agreed that the southern Ming Empire could continue to buy food, but the price would be raised by 30%. A 30% price increase was still acceptable to the southern Ming Empire. What they were afraid of was that the Yang Xie wouldn't sell food. That would be the worst-case scenario. Regarding this matter, we also sent people to discuss with the officials of Yangxia. The other party also revealed a certain amount of information. It's not that they don't want to sell food. After all, the Yangxia boasted that they wanted to bring the Han people to the peak of the world. The Southern Ming Empire is full of Han people, and they can't just watch the people starve to death. However, they still want to raise the price. This is something that the emperor can't accept. Our embroidered uniform guards are responsible for buying food at a 30% price increase to prepare for war. Mao Mu said a lot in one breath. After he finished speaking, he closed his mouth and looked at Chen Xingbao and his nephew's performance. The matter was already very clear, and Chen Xingbao was also thinking in his heart. If this was the case, this was indeed a good job. Once he could buy a lot of food, the emperor would definitely be happy. Then he would be able to obtain merit. However, the problem was that it wasn't easy to talk about the price of food. Thus, he asked the crucial question, "Eunuch Mao, does the emperor mean that there's a possibility of the price increasing?" The emperor naturally hopes that it will be as low as possible. However, the food is now in the hands of others. Of course, it's not up to us to decide. If it must increase, then we can only accept it. Mao Mu spread out his hands, and there was a hint of helplessness on his face. This meant that there was room for fluctuation. This way, not only could this task be completed, there might even be a lot of profit in the process. Chen Xingbao's eyes lit up. He had already decided to accept this task for his nephew. When he looked at Mao Mu, he didn't blame him at all. Not only that, his eyes were filled with admiration. It seemed that he had really wronged him before. If Mao Mu really didn't want Chen Liang to be the commander, then why would he mention such an important task? When he thought about how he had wronged him, a trace of guilt flashed across Chen Xingbao's face. He then said, "Eunuch Mao, it was indeed a misunderstanding. I have wronged you. How about this? Chen Liang will accept this task. When you return, please hand over the relevant matters. What do you think?" Everything will be done according to Eunuch Chen's wishes. Mao Mu pretended to hesitate for a moment, then agreed. As for whether the other party would gain merit because of this, sorry, this was originally a trap. Chen Liang was willing to fall into it, so he couldn't blame others. Mao Mu was politely sent away. Chen Xingbao and his nephew, Chen Liang, went into a secret meeting. Because of the big trouble, Chen Xingbao even called the eunuch, Songda, to help Chen Liang. After that, he repeatedly reminded Songda that the matter must be done well so that he could show his face in front of the emperor. After Chen Liang received a good task, he was naturally very excited. Soon he brought Songda out of the palace and went straight to Yang Xie's office in the capital. In the office, a young official, Wang Tongxing, who was only 24 years old, was already waiting for Chen Liang to visit. Wang Tongxing, a student of the 6th batch of Yangxia Academy in Crimson City. When he graduated, he was ranked first in all aspects and caught the eye of Yang Qindong. First, he was sent to the city lord's mansion and started from a small position. His work ability was once recognized by city lord Yu Qian. After that, he was trained by Yang Qindong. This time he was sent to Southern Ming to cooperate with Mao Mu to seize power. As a student of the Yang Family Academy, there was no need to talk about their ability. More importantly, they were loyal to their leader, Yang Qindong. In the eyes of these students, without Yang Qindong, they wouldn't have everything they had now. In addition, in ancient times, students were very respectful to their teachers. If anyone dared to violate them, they would not be tolerated by this society. This kind of student was naturally worthy of trust. Wang Tongxing was a person who was trusted. Before he came, Yang Qindong specially called him over to give him some instructions. He was very clear about the task this time. Therefore, when he heard that someone in the office reported that the commander of the Southern Ming Brocade Guards, Chen Liang, had come to visit, a smile flashed across his face. The fish had taken the bait. Not only Chen Liang, but many well-informed people from the Southern Ming Empire also knew of Yang Xi's strength. Unknowingly, they had developed the thought of being inferior to him. Therefore, as soon as he entered the office, Chen Liang put away his arrogance and became cautious. He even smiled at everyone he met. For someone like Chen Liang, if he was born during the anti-Japanese war, he would be a complete traitor. After being led to a room, Chen Liang saw Wang Tongxing. However, it was different from what he imagined. Wang Tongxing immediately asked greedily, "Commander Chen, right? Such an important position must be very rich. This is the first time we meet. Do you have any greeting gift?" Chen Liang had never experienced such a thing. The moment they met, they immediately asked for money. Even the most savage and unscrupulous group of eunuchs in his eyes didn't seem to do things so blatantly. For a moment he was stunned. Qianliang didn't respond. Wang Tongxing was very angry. He waved his hand and said, "Since you didn't prepare a greeting gift, you can go back. This official is tired today. We can talk about the food another day." Chapter 1677. I don't want it. Seeing that Wang Tongxing was angry, Qianliang immediately reacted. He stretched out his hand and said to Songde, "Quick, do you have anything good on you? Take it out quickly." Songde's face was bitter, but he did not dare to offend Qianliang. He could only take out a small pendant from his waist. When he was serving Zhu Qizhen, the emperor was in a good mood and gave it to him. He treated it as a family heirloom. When the small pendant was taken out, it was snatched away by Qianliang. He then presented it to Wang Tongxing with a flattering expression. "Sir, do you like it? This is a pendant given to eunuchs by the emperor. It's all good stuff." "Not bad, not bad." Wang Tongxing took the pendant and looked at it. It was indeed a good piece of jade. Wang Tongxing nodded with satisfaction. He then smiled and introduced himself to Qianliang. He said that he was the person in charge of negotiating the grain price with the Southern Ming Empire. Since the person in charge was in front of him, Qianliang felt relieved. Both sides sat together and began to discuss. Things weren't as complicated as Qianliang thought. The Yang faction didn't have any intention of not selling grain to the Southern Ming Empire. According to Wang Tongxing's introduction, the Yang faction was now vigorously reclaiming wastelands and developing agriculture. Now they had so much grain that they couldn't finish it. Although they had built many granaries, they still couldn't store the grain. If this continued for a long time, there was a possibility that the grain would rot. This was also why the two sides were discussing the issue of grain sales when they were about to go to war. Hearing this, Qianliang's eyes lit up. He felt that he had met a wooden club. This kind of confidential matter should not be easily announced. Now that the other party had told him everything, wasn't that the same as revealing the bottom line in advance? Wang Tongxing did not seem to have this awareness. He continued, "Of course we can sell the grain to you. The key is the problem of price. Sai, to be honest, as a Yangxia official, it is hard. You don't know. Although we seem to be treated well, there are too many people relying on me. I pity my wife and 6 concubines. How am I going to feed them?" As they chatted, Wang Tongxing began to talk about his own difficulties. Qianliang was stunned when he heard this. He didn't understand. "How many concubines you have and how many people you need to feed is none of my business. Is there any meaning in telling me these things?" On the other hand, Songde, who came along with Qianliang, was a smart person. He saw something and immediately pulled Qianliang, who was still in a daze, and then whispered something. Wang Tongxing saw these small actions, but he didn't stop them. Instead, he picked up his teacup and drank his tea as if he didn't see them. After Songde bit Qianliang's ear for a while, he quickly revealed a look of realization. He nodded, and when he looked at Wang Tongxing, he asked in a probing tone, "Lord Wang, I understand what you mean. You can rest assured that once this matter is settled, you will be rewarded handsomely. But how much do you think is suitable for this price?" "Aha, Lord Chen is a smart man. Since that's the case, the price is easy to negotiate. You can set any price, but it can't be lower than the original price. It can't be more than 30% of the original price. Of course, the higher the price, the more manipulative it will be, and the more benefits we will receive." When he heard that it was only 30% of the original price, Qianliang was naturally overjoyed. He opened his mouth and wanted to agree, but when he heard that the higher the price, the more benefits he would receive, he immediately shut his mouth and his mind began to wander. At the end of the day, there was nothing more practical than money. Money was the only thing that could be relied on and could save a life at a critical moment. As long as he had a large amount of money, so what if he didn't want to be a commander? He could be a rich man and enjoy life, couldn't he? The temptation of the silver made Qianliang's eyes light up, but he still carefully asked, "Lord Wang, if that's the case, what if we double the original price of the unit price? But how much can we gain from this?" It wasn't a 30% increase but a 100% increase. This way there would be a lot of manipulation in the middle. Of course, the Southern Ming Empire would have to pay a great price for this. But who cares? The Southern Ming Empire belonged to the imperial court, the Zhu clan and Zhu Qizhen. It didn't belong to the 3 of them, so why would they care so much? Double the original price, this price is not bad. Wang Tongxing was very satisfied when he heard this. After thinking for a while, he said, "Then this official will report to Yangxia that the price has been increased by 50%. This way this official will be able to account for it. This way there will be 50% of the profits, enough for us to split, hee hee." Aha, very good, very good. Qian Liang laughed heartily when he heard that there would be at least 25% of the profits. Neither side had expected the matter to progress so smoothly. However, they were both greedy people. What they cared about was getting the money in the bag. In order to get the silver as soon as possible without any accidents, Qian Liang stood and said, "In that case, I will report this matter to the court. I think there will be news soon." "Good, then I'll have to trouble Lord Qian. This official will wait here for your good news." Wang Tongxing also stood up with a satisfied smile on his face. When he saw that Qian Liang and Songda were about to leave, he didn't forget to add, "Next time, don't forget to bring a greeting gift." This caused Qian Liang and Songda to stagger and almost fall to the ground. At almost the same time, a word appeared in their minds: corrupt official. Because of this, the two of them trusted Wang Tongxing even more. Because only such a corrupt official would do something that harmed the Yangxie, such as selling Yangxie's grain to the southern Ming Empire at a low price. This gave them the opportunity to earn a large sum of money from the difference in price. Qian Liang and Songda left. They didn't know that when they walked out of Yangxie's office, the greedy Wang Tongxing behind them had already returned to his original appearance. His expression was calm and his eyes were spirited. He didn't look like a greedy official at all. The two of them quickly returned to the imperial palace and saw Qian Xingbao and eunuch Zhang Qin who was serving him. Seeing that there were no outsiders, the two of them gave a detailed report of their meeting. They reported that Wang Tongxing had asked for a greeting gift the moment they met and reminded them to bring a greeting gift the next time they met. When Qian Xingbao heard this, he couldn't help but laugh. This Bugnam of Gojozian, he's good at fighting and is also an excellent commander. However, when it comes to managing officials, he really isn't that good. However, this is also good. Otherwise, how can we earn money from this? Seeing that Qian Xingbao seemed to have agreed, Qian Liang went forward and said, "Uncle, this matter can be done. However, isn't doubling the original price a bit too much?" "Not much, not much." Qian Xingbao shook his head and said, "You don't understand the emperor's heart. What the emperor wants is to be able to buy grain and have enough war reserves. Besides, buying grain isn't a long-term plan. Didn't you see that the imperial court has already started preparing for spring? In the future, our land will also be able to grow grain and we won't need to buy from Yangxie. Therefore, we have to seize the opportunity in front of us to make a fortune. Otherwise, we don't know when we will have such an opportunity." Qian Xingbao was Zhu Qizhan's chief eunuch, so he naturally knew more. He also understood Zhu Qizhan's thoughts better than others. When Qian Xingbao said this, Qian Liang's eyes lit up as he said, "Uncle, since this is the case, then nephew should write a report?" "Yes, immediately write a report. Remember, you have to write down how you tried to persuade Yangxie's officials. This is a good opportunity for you to make a name for yourself," Qian Xingbao instructed. Qian Liang nodded continuously. "Uncle, don't worry. Nephew knows what to do." "Oh right, of the 25% profit, 15% is to be filial to uncle. All these years, uncle has taken care of nephew so much. Nephew is very grateful." Seeing Qian Liang being so tactful, Qian Xingbao laughed in satisfaction. Then he patted Qian Liang's shoulder and said, "Well said, well said. Actually, uncle is old and won't live for long. In the future, uncle's money will be left to you." "Chem? Ah. Yes, yes." This scene of uncle and nephew being harmonious was seen by Songda and Zhang Qin. The two of them were envious. Why didn't they have such a good uncle? Qian Liang was a man of action. He quickly finished writing the report and even found a literate eunuch to polish it. Then Qian Xingbao personally delivered it to Zhu Qizhan. Hearing that the matter of grain was settled, Zhu Qizhan was very happy. When he received the report, he sighed and said, "My wife is my beloved official. My wife's nephew is also not bad. Truly a family of two." Receiving such praise, Qian Xingbao was very excited. However, his eyebrows didn't move at all. Instead, he said seriously, "Everything this subject has is given to me by the emperor. It is my duty to work for the emperor. I don't dare to be greedy." Good. Seeing Qian Xingbao's neither arrogant nor impatient appearance, Zhu Qizhan was even happier. He opened the report and read it. Then his expression became more serious. He said with displeasure, "Why is the price so expensive? Our financial pressure is too great." Knowing that Zhu Qizhan would say this, Qian Xingbao quickly explained, "Your Majesty, there is nothing we can do about it. After all, we are going to war with the Yangxie. As two people who are going to be enemies, it is already very difficult for them to sell grain to us. This is also because Qian Liang used the reason that the Han people of the southern Ming dynasty don't have any grain to eat. If we use this as military grain, I'm afraid that the other side won't sell it to us even if we give them mountains of gold and silver. Chapter 1678. That makes sense. Since that's the case, let's talk about it. But remember, you must buy more. No one knows how long this war will last. We must make more preparations. Zhu Qizhen felt that Qian Senbeo's words were reasonable and nodded in agreement. Since Zhu Qizhen agreed, Qian Senbeo's heart could be at ease. After leaving Qingjing Hall, he called Qian Liang and Song De and told them to immediately go to Yang Xie's office to settle the matter, so as to avoid any problems or the other party increasing the price. Then he took out a jade ruby that the emperor had bestowed to him and said, "This is a meeting gift for Sir Wang. You must handle this matter well." "Uncle, please rest assured." "Please rest assured, Qian Gonggong." Qian Liang and Song De agreed with a smile. After receiving the jade ruby, they quickly made preparations and left the palace. In Yang Xie's office, Qian Liang once again met Wang Tongxing. When he took out the jade ruby, the other party was clearly very satisfied. The following conversation went even more smoothly. In the end, they settled on an agreement to buy 10 million share of grain first. The salary of the great Ming dynasty's officials was very low. The 7th-rank county magistrate of the Ming dynasty only had an annual income of 90 share, which was less than 200 taels of silver. They also had to feed a large number of people. In order to dominate the entire southern Ming dynasty's market, Yang Xie sold grain at a very low price. 1 share, about 120 caddies, was originally sold for 2 taels of silver by Yang Xie. Now it was 4 taels of silver. 10 million share was 40 million taels of silver. The actual payment to Yang Xie was only 30 million taels of silver. The uncle and nephew of the Qian family earned 5 million taels of silver. After the agreement was settled, Yang Xie's office began to transport the grain. Qian Liang said that the next time they met, he would bring money and make preparations to receive the grain. Both sides happily parted, but Wang Tongxing still didn't forget to say that the next time they came, they had to bring a meeting gift. This made Qian Liang extremely angry. After this transaction, the other party could earn 5 million taels of silver. Wasn't that enough? They even wanted a meeting gift. They were even more greedy than him. After watching Qian Liang and Song De leave in a hurry, Wang Tongxing said to one of his followers with a smile on his face, "Go and spread the news. The matter is done. We can start now." "Yes, sir." The follower replied and quickly left. Not long after, Mao Mu received news from the liaison team that they could take action. He rubbed his hands together and said to eunuch Zhu Hai, "Little Hai, let's act according to plan." "Yes, eunuch Mao." Zhu Hai's heart thumped wildly. As Mao Mu's trusted eunuch, he already knew that his father-in-law wanted to deal with Chen Xingbao. Previously, his heart had been hanging in the air because he knew what would happen if he failed in such a battle. However, in order to obtain more power, they had no choice but to fight. Fortunately, his master's plan was meticulous. Now that he saw that most of the matter had been accomplished, he could finally rest assured and get to work. Half a day after Zhu Hai left, a rumor began to circulate in Jingdo. If an official wanted to protect himself, it was useless to find a monk to protect him. Mao Mu of the Brocade Guard was the one who had the final say. As soon as the news came out, many officials became nervous. They had just sent a large sum of silver to Monk Qian not long ago. Now that he said it was useless, they had to get the money back and transfer it to Mao Mu. But after all, it was just a rumor and had not been confirmed. Everyone wanted to continue observing and not be confused by this news without a source. What happened next did not need them to linger around. The Brocade Guard suddenly came to the manor of the Ministry of Justice's censor, He Xingqiao, and took him away. He Xingqiao's sudden arrest made everyone's hair stand on end. A few days ago, when everyone was drinking together, He Xingqiao, who had drunk a little too much, said that he had sent 50,000 taels of silver to Monk Qian. However, he had now been taken away by the Brocade Guard. Did this not prove that the rumor was true? No one wanted to be the next person to be taken away. After a discussion, the officials chose a few representatives to enter the palace to see Monk Qian. "Since your words no longer have any effect on the Brocade Guard, you should return the silver we sent and we will send it to eunuch Mao Mu. In short, we don't care how you fight, but don't encroach on our power." One official was not scary. What was scary was dozens of officials gathered together. Even Zhu Qizhen would have a headache dealing with this force. Zhu Qizhen did not know about this at this time. He was listening to Mao Mu's secret report. Since it was a secret report, of course, he would not let more people be present. Especially when he heard that this secret report was related to his partner, Monk Qian, All the eunuchs in the Qingjing hall were driven out. Only 2 eunuchs, Mao Mu and Zhang Chen, were left. Zhang Chen, the eunuch who was regarded as Monk Qian's confidant, had another identity. He was Mao Mu's spy. There was nothing in the world that money could not solve. If it could not be solved, then money would be added. Zhang Chen had been bought over by Mao Mu long ago. That was when Zhang Chen was just a little eunuch. He entered the palace because his family was poor. Once he was accidentally discovered by Mao Mu. That day he happened to go out to buy silk for the empress. He saw Zhang Chen's father saying something at the palace gate. At that time Zhang Chen's face was full of tears. With the idea of making more good karma, Mao Mu walked forward and learned that Zhang Chen's mother was seriously ill and urgently needed money. Zhang Chen's father really had no choice. Only then did he think of his son in the palace who was no longer a healthy person. But at that time Zhang Chen was just the lowest level eunuch. He had no power, no influence, and no extra money. It was not easy to get some monthly allowance, but it was deducted by the eunuchs. There was not much left. Mao Mu took out 100 taels of silver at one time. Zhang Chen was so grateful that he wanted to kneel down on the spot. From then on, Zhang Chen became Mao Mu's man. However, because his level was too low, and Mao Mu was very low-key at that time, no one noticed this matter. From then on, Mao Mu kept giving Zhang Chen money. Zhang Chen was also a smart and capable person. Step by step, he became Qian Sengbao's right-hand man and became his right-hand man. Mao Mu brought Zhang Chen to Zhu Qizhen to report to him about the food. When Zhang Chen knelt on the ground and told Zhu Qizhen everything he heard from Qian Sengbao, Zhu Qizhen's face was gloomy. He admired Qian Sengbao very much. He felt that Qian Sengbao's words and actions were in line with his temperament. Therefore he kept him by his side and treated him as an existence like Wang Zhen. Wang Zhen grew up with Zhu Qizhen. Otherwise he would not be called Zhu Qizhen's partner. In contrast, Qian Sengbao came to Zhu Qizhen's side later. The reason why he was called Zhu Qizhen's partner was a kind of commemoration. It showed that the emperor did not forget Wang Zhen in his heart. In fact, they were not at the same level at all. If Wang Zhen did something out of line, Zhu Qizhen would at most punish him verbally. After that, he would still be in an important position. But if it was Qian Sengbao, then it would be different. This was someone who could be replaced. After all, he was here to replace Wang Zhen. When he heard that Qian Sengbao, his most trusted eunuch, actually extended his hand into the food business and caused the southern Ming Empire to lose 10 million taels of silver in one go, Zhu Qizhen had already sentenced him to death in his heart. Zhu Qizhen could tolerate Qian Sengbao's small mistakes, such as accepting bribes from some officials. But when it came to major issues, he absolutely could not tolerate it. Beloved Minister Mao, is this true? Zhu Qizhen still maintained a trace of calmness in his mind. He knew that he could not only listen to one side of the story. It is true. Reporting to your Majesty, after this subject found out about this matter, this subject has already done an investigation and sent people to question that official from the Yang family. This is the other party's testimony. As Mao Mu spoke, he handed over another memorial, which recorded Wang Tongxing's testimony. The southern Ming Empire's officials naturally could not do anything to Yang Xie's officials. However, Mao Mu was different. He was originally Yang Qindong's person. Wang Tongxing's mission was to cooperate with him. This time he would naturally betray Qian Liang and the others. Zhu Qizhen reached out and took the memorial. After reading it, he was burning with anger. He sternly said, "Someone come, bring Qian Sengbao over to Zhen." As soon as the decree was issued, a small eunuch came over and knelt on the ground, trembling as he said, "Your Majesty, there are many officials outside. They are all looking for Qian Fengbao. They said that Qian Fengbao accepted the money but did not do anything. They are clamoring for a refund." What happened? Zhu Qizhen was stunned when he heard this. His gaze naturally fell on Mao Mu, who was standing there with a calm expression. "Reporting to your Majesty, something must have happened because Qian Fengbao accepted the money from those officials. Your Majesty, Qian Fengbao had already informed this subject before. However, the problem is that Qian Fengbao wanted to protect too many people. Many of them are problematic officials. They said very negative things in private. They said that our southern Ming Empire is not a match for Yang Xie. If we must go to war, it would be like smashing an egg against a rock. There were also some who persuaded our southern Ming Empire to submit to Yang Xie. It is absolutely impossible to not capture such people. Otherwise there will be a big problem. Qian Fengbao still wanted to protect them. This subject was also in a difficult position. However, considering the imperial court and our southern Ming Empire, this subject still sent people to capture them. There was no need to say anything more. Zhu Qizhen had already figured out the whole story. He really did not expect that Chen Fengbao, who had always seemed very loyal, would become like this. He actually wanted to affect the Southern Ming Empire's plan with his own strength. He even won over so many officials. The most important thing was that the other party came knocking on his door. It was truly a display of incompetence and greed. There was no need to use such a person anymore. There was also no need to leave any face. Chapter 1679. Originally, he wanted to reprimand him to see if he had a chance to change. But after the official made such a fuss, Zhu Qizhen gave up all his fantasies. Beloved official Mao, arrest him. This subject obeys. Mao Mu showed a trace of hesitation. Of course, he wouldn't plead for Qian Xingbao, but he still had to act. After all, everyone knew that he was where he was today because of Qian Xingbao's help. This trace of hesitation was seen by Zhu Qizhen. He sighed in his heart at Mao Mu's benevolence and said, "All right, we know what you want to say. But Qian Xingbao's crime cannot be forgiven. You don't need to say any more. Go." Yes. Mao Mu knew that he had done what he needed to do. The next step was to uproot Qian's faction. Without Qian Xingbao, the entire group of eunuchs would be in his hands. This way he could finally play a role in helping Yang Qindong. Think about it, with the help of these eunuchs, how could any of Nanming's actions escape Mao Mu's eyes? It meant that everything Nanming did would be known by Yang Qindong and Yang Xie. How could this battle continue? Qian Xingbao was arrested. Qian Liang, Song De, and the others were also arrested. When a large group of embroidered uniform guards appeared in front of them, Qian Liang shouted loudly, "Are your dog eyes blind? Don't you know that I'm the commander?" Qian Liang, who still wanted to show off, was met with a series of punches and kicks. He completely became obedient. As for Qian Xingbao, he shouted loudly that he wanted to see the emperor, but no one paid attention to him. He was tied up and brought to the embroidered uniform guards' prison. In the prison, Qian Xingbao finally saw Mao Mu. Different from before, one was a prisoner and the other was an official. When he saw Mao Mu appear, Qian Xingbao changed his decadent appearance and threw himself on the iron bars in front of the cage. "Eunuch Mao, quickly go see the emperor. Tell him that this official has something to say. This subject is innocent." At this time, Qian Xingbao still had a commanding tone, which really made Mao Mu unhappy. At this time he didn't need to lower his head like before. He changed his attitude and raised his head. "What? Eunuch Qian, still think that the emperor wants to see you at this time? Think about all the wrong things you've done. His Majesty has been accommodating you again and again, but how did you repay him? You embezzled 5 million taels of grain, you really have a big heart." After a round of sarcasm, Qian Xingbao, he roared, I know, it was all you, it was you, to me. You were the one who instigated me to take on this matter. Good you. How?" Looking at Qian Xingbao, who finally understood everything, Mao Mu only shook his head. A defeated general was no longer worth him wasting any effort on this person. She reached into her bosom and took out a piece of white silk and threw it into the prison. "The emperor said that since you have served him for so many years, he will give eunuch Qian a dignified death. Kill yourself." Finishing, Mao Mu turned and left. Ignoring Qian Xingbao's angry shouts and pleas, he headed in the other direction of the prison. Wang Zhuo, Qin Sun, and the other court officials were locked up there. After these officials were captured and sent to the discipline prison, they really didn't suffer much. They were arranged to be in a clean single room. Every day they were fed well. There was paper, ink, and brush in front of them. On the surface, it was for them to report their problems, but on the surface, it was for them to practice calligraphy. After all, there was no entertainment in prison. Practicing calligraphy could calm the mind. Although Mao Mu had come a few times before, he had never had a deep conversation. At that time his position was not stable. Now it was different. The chief eunuchs who were older than him had been taken down one by one. The remaining eunuchs were tactfully under him. He could finally do what he wanted in prison. He didn't need to be afraid of others spying on him or reporting him. The first to arrive was Wang Zhuo's room. When the embroidered uniform guard opened the door, Wang Zhuo was practicing calligraphy. He didn't seem to have any intention of stopping when he saw Mao Mu arrive. He had a feeling that Mao Mu was different from the other eunuchs. However, before the other party revealed his intentions, he wouldn't say anything. This one greets official Wang. When there was no one else in the prison, Mao Mu immediately gave a junior's greeting. Wang Zhuo finally put down the brush in his hand. He turned around and said, "Why is eunuch Mao doing this? Right now you are an official and I am a prisoner. There is no need for such formalities." No, official Wang is not a prisoner. You are not guilty. The reason why you were brought here is because I don't want you to work for the Southern Ming Empire. This is all Bugnam of Gojoseon's intention. Mao Mu finally decided to speak the truth. He also believed that at this time Wang Zhuo should know what to do. As expected, when he said this, Wang Zhuo was stunned. After a long while he sighed and said, Bugnam of Gojoseon really has good methods. He even has his hands in the palace. If this old man's guess is correct, eunuch Mao should have the final say in the palace. As official Wang thinks, the stones that should be moved have been moved. Right now, this subject's words still have some weight in the palace. Mao Mu replied modestly. Amazing, amazing. Wang Zhuo sighed. When he looked at Mao Mu, his attitude became more serious. However, what ability did this old man have to make Bugnam of Gojoseon calculate and arrange things like this? In fact, even if this old man was in court, the Southern Ming Empire wouldn't be a match for Bugnam of Gojoseon. This is different. Mao Mu shook his head. Bugnam of Gojoseon wants to lead the Han people to the peak of the world. If the Yangtze and the Southern Ming Empire really fight, it will only benefit the other foreign races. This is why this kind of plan is made. I hope official Wang can understand. I understand. Wang Zhuo said emotionally. Bugnam of Gojoseon's goal is to do so much for the Han people. It really makes me blush with shame. Speaking of which, this old man is about to enter the ground. If there is something I can do for our people before I pass away, it is also my wish. This meant that he was going to help. Mao Mu was waiting for this result. He immediately said happily, if Bugnam of Gojoseon knows of official Wang's choice, he will definitely be very gratified and grateful. This old man doesn't dare to accept this. Bugnam of Gojoseon should be the one receiving the gratitude of all the Han people. Alright, since it's like this, I hope eunuch Mao can wait a moment. I will write a few letters and trouble you to send them over. They are all this old man's students. They won't dare to disobey this old man's words. Please start writing, official Wang. This little one will be honored to grind ink for official Wang. Mao Mu also didn't expect things to go so smoothly. In fact, for an old official like Wang Zhuo, he had seen many wonderful things in his life. He was used to seeing the change of imperial power, the internal strife between officials, and the suffering of the common people. Now that there was finally someone who could change everything, how could they not help? Moreover, these days in prison had already made them understand that since the emperor didn't trust them, there was no need for them to risk their lives for him. It was better to go with the flow. Of course, there was another important reason. Yang Qindong definitely knew what they were doing now. Even if they couldn't enjoy this kindness, they still had children and grandchildren who could be taken care of. In this way, everything they did now would be worth it. Mao Mu grinded ink. Wang Zhuo personally wrote more than 10 secret letters. This meant that there were at least 10 officials in the court who would stand on Yang Xie's side in the battle between Yang Xie and the Southern Ming dynasty. There were many Southern Ming officials who were arrested in prison. One could imagine what kind of consequences it would cause. The situation in the Southern Ming dynasty finally stabilized. Mao Mu took over and controlled the entire group of eunuchs. His subordinate, Zhang Qin, became the head eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate. His subordinate, Zhu Hai, became the eunuch in charge of the emperor's daily care. With the help of these people and the embroidered uniform guards in his hands, it was guaranteed that if there were any big movements, Yang Qindong would be the first to know. In Qichen City, Baiming's observer group had also left and returned. Because Hu Shao was old and couldn't bear the pain of the bumpy journey, he was left in Qichen City. Queen Hu Yin found a large house outside the palace. When she missed her grandfather, she could go and see him at any time to relieve the pain of homesickness. During this time, Yang Qindong met with the representatives of Baiming's observer group. Among them was the leader of the observer group, the Crown Prince's junior tutor, Grand Scholar and Minister of Justice, Su Yozhen. Speaking of Su Yozhen, his fate was completely changed by Yang Qindong. In history he made a great contribution in saving Zhu Qishan. Later he rebelled and was killed. Now he was still alive and well. Not only that, but he also became the teacher of Zhu Qiu's only son Zhu Jianji. More importantly, Su Yozhen was Yang Qindong's subordinate. This allowed him to maintain an excellent state of mind in the upcoming battle between Baiming and Yang Xie. Su Yozhen was secretly brought to a small courtyard by Yang Qindong at night. His identity couldn't be exposed yet. Under the guidance of the Black Knight Dragon Guard, Su Yozhen saw Yang Qindong in the small courtyard, who was singing to the moon. She quickly walked a few steps forward. When he got close, he knelt on the ground with a thud. Minister Su Yozhen greets the king. Ah, please rise. Yang Qindong helped Su Yozhen up with a smile on his face. He looked like a group of ministers who were enjoying each other's company. Very few people knew the contents of the meeting. Even the Black Cavalry didn't know the details. They only knew that when Su Yozhen was about to leave, he had a satisfied smile on his face. Biming's observer group finally left. What they saw and heard in Chichen City would slowly ferment over time. Yang Qindong didn't care anymore because he was preparing to attack the southern Ming Empire. Chapter 1680. Zhu Qizhen actually dared to let Chao Jixiang work with Yang Qindong to deal with him and even created an imperial edict to confer the title of the new Bugnam of Gojoseon. This was equivalent to creating an excellent excuse for Yang Qindong to attack the southern Ming Empire. He originally thought that it would take some time before he had to mobilize his troops. Everything was brought forward because of this accident. In the third month of 1468 AD, 2 months after the southern Ming observation group returned, Yang Xie advanced from Guangxi to Guangdong in the name of cleaning up the emperor. The battle was about to begin. Yang Xie sent out the 1st Cavalry Division, the New Army, the 3rd Army, the 2nd, 4th and 5th Divisions of the Lung Vanguard, as well as the 1st, Ming 2nd and Ming 3rd Divisions of the Russian Empire. Close to 300,000 troops were split into 3 directions: Guangdong, Hubei and Jiangxi. The 1st Cavalry Division, the 5th Division of the Lung Vanguard, and the 3rd Division of the Ming 3rd Division of the Jiangxi Vanguard, the New Army, the 4th Division of the Lung Vanguard, and the 2nd Division of the Ming 3rd Division of the Russian Empire went to Hubei. The 300,000 troops moved out with great momentum, causing Guangdong, Hubei and Jiangxi to be in a state of emergency. Southern Ming capital, Yingtian Prefecture. Kuang Yi, who was already over 80 years old, dragged his sickly body into the palace to meet the southern Ming Emperor, Zhu Qizhen. Ever since he returned from Chichen City, Kuang Yi had been sick. After all, he was old and no longer as brave as he used to be. This old man who should have died in the wooden fortress had his fate changed by Yang Qindong. However, he was finally at the end of his life. Give him a seat. Seeing Kuang Yi trembling as he walked into the hall, Zhu Qizhen shouted from the bottom of his heart. Eunuch Zhu Hai hurriedly complied and directed the other eunuchs to bring over a wooden chair with a very thick cushion on it. He then helped Kuang Yi sit on it. After tossing and turning, Kuang Yi's face was slightly red, which was caused by his anger. It seemed that his body really couldn't take it anymore. This old subject has come to see your majesty to ask on behalf of the officials of the Ministry of War whether the food and military equipment have been properly prepared and whether the soldiers are sufficient. Kuang Yi took a long while to finish his words. Minister Kuang, the food and weapons have been prepared. It's just that the issue of the source of soldiers is still a little troublesome. I'm afraid it'll take some time. Zhu Qizhen's voice had a trace of fear in it as he spoke. There was nothing they could do about it. The influence of the members of the observer group was too great. Under their influence, it seemed that everyone knew that Yang Xie was extraordinarily powerful. They all knew that if they were to fight with them, they would lose more than they would win. As a result, many young people were unwilling to join the army. After receiving the news, Zhu Qizhen had no choice but to give the order to capture able-bodied men. But even so, the effect was still not good. Many young people ran away from home and hid in the nearby homes. This made it difficult for the supply of reinforcements to arrive. Kuang Yi had been bedridden at home for a while, so he wasn't clear about the matters of the court. When he heard that the army wasn't fully prepared, he couldn't help but anxiously say, "Your Majesty, this can't be sloppy. Yang Xie is extremely powerful. In addition, they have countless experienced veterans. Even if we were to fight them one by one, we would still be at a disadvantage. If we don't have enough soldiers, we won't be able to suppress them with numbers. I'm afraid that it will be even more difficult to obtain victory." "Yes, Minister Kuang's words, we understand. You should go back and recuperate first. Once you're well, we still need to put you in an important position." Zhu Qizhen didn't want to tell Kuang Yi about the difficulties of the court. First, it was useless. Second, it would only add to his worries. Since it was like this, it was better not to say anything. Seeing that the emperor had agreed, Kuang Yi couldn't force him too much. Trembling, he stood up and took his leave. After leaving Qingjing Hall, he didn't go home. Instead, he went straight to the Ministry of Personnel's Yamen. He wanted to see Minister Qin Sun and have a good talk with him. He wanted him to send capable people to take charge of the recruitment of soldiers. Because he had been kept in the dark by his family, Kuang Yi didn't know that Qin Sun had long been arrested by the embroidered uniform guards. When he arrived at the Ministry of Personnel and saw that the new minister Chao Jie had come to greet him, he had a puzzled expression. He knew this Chao Jie. He had always worked in the Ministry of Personnel. He didn't have any great abilities, but he was good at forming cliques. He had a good reputation among the officials. However, he was still an old official and the Minister of War. What was the meaning of sending Chao Jie? He immediately said, "This old man isn't looking for you. Tell your Minister Qin to come out and greet me." Minister Qin? There's no Minister Qin in the Ministry of Personnel. There's only Minister Chao. Official Kwang, have you become muddle-headed? An official from the Ministry of Personnel gave an answer without thinking too much in order to flatter Chao Jie. Chao Jie didn't say anything to stop his subordinates' rudeness. These old fellows were already so old, yet they still occupied such important positions. He had long found them unpleasant to the eye. Young people also needed to stand out. Thus, he allowed his subordinate to speak to Kwang Yi with such an attitude. Kwang Yi's health wasn't good to begin with. He should be recuperating at home. How could he have been provoked? In front of the emperor, he was given a seat and treated with kind words. Who would have thought that he would receive such treatment in the Ministry of Personnel? He would be directly contradicted by an unknown minor official. Kwang Yi's personality was very straightforward and impulsive. Most of the time he was the one who didn't follow the rules. This was also one of the reasons why he was able to become the Minister of War. If you weren't strong enough, you wouldn't be able to control the people in the Ministry of War. When had he ever been treated like this? His face immediately flushed red with anger. However, when he thought of the country's great plan, he forcefully restrained himself. He didn't know what had happened recently, so he couldn't help but say, "I want to see Qin Sun." "You want to see Qin Sun? Easy. Go to the embroidered uniform guard's discipline prison." That minor official saw that Kwang Yi seemed to have been subdued by him. His face was full of pride and he spoke even more unscrupulously. Discipline prison? For a moment, Kwang Yi didn't quite understand. That's right, the discipline prison. At this moment, Chao Jie opened his mouth. It seemed as if he was explaining, but in reality he just wanted to anger Kwang Yi. He wanted to use this opportunity to tell those old officials who had the final say in the Ministry of Personnel. They were old, so they shouldn't stand out and give orders. Not only is Qin Sun in the discipline prison, but Wang Zue, Xie Chong, Xiao Xian and the others are also there. They actually said that the Nanming Empire wasn't a match for Yang Xie and caused a bad influence. They've all been arrested. Chao Jie had just finished speaking when he saw a black figure suddenly collapse in front of him. Upon closer inspection, he realized that Kwang Yi had fainted from anger. Blood was flowing out of the corner of his mouth. It was obvious that he had fainted from anger. Considering Kwang Yi's seniority, if he really died in the Ministry of Personnel, he wouldn't be able to explain himself. He hurriedly shouted for people to carry the unconscious Kwang Yi and send him to the Kwang Manor. Then he sent people to the palace to find an imperial physician. Kwang Yi fainted from anger and his body's condition worsened. When he returned to the manor, he slowly woke up after tossing and turning and spitting out another mouthful of blood. He muttered the words "destroying the Great Wall," and fainted again. 3 days later, Kwang Yi finally breathed his last. This loyal official who had devoted his entire life to building the Great Ming Empire's army finally left the Great Ming Empire at a crucial time. This was all thanks to Mao Mu. He had captured all of the capable officials of the Nanming Empire and replaced them with officials who only knew how to fight for power and profit. In reality, they didn't have much ability. Not only did this cause the Nanming Empire's work to be unable to progress smoothly, it also caused Kwang Yi to faint from anger until he died of illness. However, at this time no one cared about Kwang Yi's life or death. Even when Zhu Qizhen received the news, he only sent his prince, Zhu Jianxin, to offer his condolences. Speaking of Zhu Jianxin, he was already a young man of 21 years old. He was in his prime. In history, Emperor Xianzong of Ming Dynasty was wise and benevolent. He could be considered a good emperor. However, it was a pity that Yang Qindong's arrival changed everything. First, Zhu Qiyu seized the throne, causing Zhu Qizhen to no longer value familial love. In order to not repeat the same mistake, he didn't give the crown prince too much power. Secondly, Zhu Jianxin's mother was Madame Zhou. Because Empress Qin was in good health, she didn't die early under Mao Mu's care. She even gave birth to another prince for Zhu Qizhen, Zhu Jiani, who was now 11 years old. His mother wasn't favored and he had a younger brother who could fight for power. As a result, he was never made the crown prince and was only an ordinary prince. This was especially true in the imperial palace. Now that Mao Mu was in power, he only had Zhu Jiani and the other young masters in his eyes. The other eunuchs naturally knew what to do. Zhu Jianxin's influence became weaker and weaker, and he could only do some unnecessary things. Kuang Yi died. Losing a great general before the great battle had even begun was somewhat unlucky. Although this great battle didn't happen, Kuang Yi wouldn't have been able to last long with his age and body. But things happened so coincidentally that the impact wasn't good. Mao Mu deliberately spread the news. For a time, whether it was in the imperial palace or among the common people, there were many unfavorable comments about the southern Ming Empire. This made the recruitment of soldiers even more difficult. After all, who would send their children to die in a war that they knew they were bound to lose? When the officials trembled and wrote a report about the recruitment of soldiers that didn't go well and presented it to Zhu Qizhen, this emperor who was plagued with misfortune didn't get angry. Or it could be said that he already knew everything and was mentally prepared. He didn't want to be like Kuang Yi and be angered to death by his officials. Zhu Qizhen couldn't help but think of those old officials. If those old officials were willing to help, things wouldn't be as bad as they were now. But when he thought of how those old officials had already been frightened by Yang Xie's strength, he didn't know what kind of problems would occur if he really used them. This idea was suppressed by him. If the recruitment of soldiers isn't going well, then we won't recruit for now. We now have 2 million soldiers in our hands and 800,000 soldiers on the front lines. We want them to fight a victory and let our people see the might of our southern Ming Empire's army. Come, write a decree to Guanyin. Have him quickly attack and find an opportunity to destroy Yang Xie's army to strengthen the prestige of our southern Ming Empire. Zhu Qizhen was very straightforward and directly issued a decree to mobilize the army. It was said that 100 words couldn't compare to a single action. Then he would use practical actions to prove it. Chapter 1681. Guangdong Provincial Commissioner's Office. Jurisdiction: Guangzhou Prefecture, Zhaoqing Prefecture, Shaozhou Prefecture, Nanxiong Prefecture, Huizhou Prefecture, Chaozhou Prefecture, Gaozhou Prefecture, Laizhou Prefecture, Lianzhou Prefecture, Cheongzhou Prefecture, etc. Of course, Gaozhou Prefecture and Laizhou Prefecture had been taken over by Yang Xie's five-star army. As a result, Guangdong was no longer complete. This had once caused Guangdong Provincial Commissioner Yang Xian to tremble in fear, fearing that the five-star army would attack at any moment. Fortunately, the imperial court had negotiated with Yang Xie, and both sides seemed to have made peace. However, Yang Xie had been assassinated in the capital, and Chao Jixiang had brought a fake imperial edict to incite Yang Xie's servant, Yang Lu, to rebel. After Yang Xie took out the imperial edict from Chao Jixiang's hands, the southern Ming imperial court naturally did not admit to it. They claimed that it was Chao Jixiang's own actions and reprimanded it for being fake. However, anyone with a bit of judgment knew that it was definitely Zhu Qizhen's doing. Although eunuchs had a lot of power, they did not have the guts to forge an imperial edict to reclaim the title of king. This was not the first time Yang Xian had cursed Chao Jixiang's incompetence. If you want to do it, then so be it. It is said that the strongest fortress is the easiest to break through from the inside. Instigating the people of the Yang faction to rebel is the right direction, but the key is why you didn't succeed, and the evidence was even obtained by others. If this isn't incompetence, then what is? Now, with such an excuse, Yang Xie would have enough reason to attack. As such, Yang Xian quickly mobilized his troops and made the decision to fight against Yang Xie. At this moment, the imperial court had also seen this scene clearly. The reinforcements had arrived. When General Guanyin brought 300,000 soldiers to Guangzhou Prefecture, Yang Xian's heart calmed down, and he hurriedly brought his officials to welcome them. After all this training, Guanyin had finally matured and became a great general. He had 300,000 soldiers under his command, and could be said to be very proud of himself. However, if one looked closely, one could see the worry in his eyes. Guanyin had dealt with the five-star army a long time ago, and they had worked together to quell a riot. At that time, the strength of the five-star army had shocked Guanyin. Now, so many years had passed, and Yang Xie had taken over several territories of the Great Ming Dynasty. The strength of the other party could be imagined. It could be said that this mission would not be easy to complete. The general died in 100 battles. As a trusted general of the southern Ming Dynasty, it was Guanyin's fate to die on the battlefield. He couldn't refuse it, and he wouldn't refuse it. He wanted to see how strong the five-star army had become. He wanted to teach the five-star army a lesson and let them know that in front of the southern Ming Empire, the five-star army was nothing. The 300,000-strong army directly moved to the outskirts of the city and set up temporary barracks. Guanyin and his group entered the city and met the civil and military officials of Guangdong. As one of the most important guards in Guangdong, General Li Hani of the Guanghai Guards reported the situation to Guanyin. For this person to be able to become the commander of a guard, he was quite capable. At the very least, he had a clear understanding of the strength of the 5-star army and the numbers of the troops sent out. General Guan, the 5-star army on the other side has around 100,000 strong soldiers. They have the 3rd Legion as the main force, with the 2nd Division of the Lung Feng Division and the 1st Division of the Russian Empire as support. The 3rd Legion has around 50,000 strong infantry and firearms. The 2nd Division of the Lung Feng Division is all firearms, and the 1st Division of the Russian Empire is all cavalry, numbering around 50,000 strong. There are also some auxiliary troops transporting rations, but the number is unknown. Oh right, I heard from the scouts that Bugnam of Gojoseon will personally come to the front lines to command the battle. After he finished speaking, General Li Hani returned to his seat. Yang Xian and the other civil officials all looked at Guan Ying expectantly, waiting for his reply. Guan Ying had already noticed everyone's gazes and knew that he had to make a statement to reassure them. He immediately laughed and said with a magnanimous tone, "Very good, General Li has done a lot of work. Since we know the enemy's deployment, the rest will be easy. This time I have brought 200,000 strong soldiers. Including the soldiers from Guangdong, we have a total of 300,000 strong soldiers. The enemy only has 100,000 strong soldiers. With 3 against 1 and the terrain advantage, how can we not win? Yes, we have the advantage in numbers and are more familiar with the terrain. We will definitely win." Yang Xian and the others agreed. For a moment, everyone voiced their agreement, as if they had already won the battle. Kuang Ye's expression did not change. All these years he had been studying the tactics of the 5-star army. Although he did not personally go to the front lines, he could see how powerful the enemy was from their achievements. He had never underestimated his opponent. If the 5-star army was easy to deal with, they would not have such glorious achievements. However, it was absolutely impossible for the Southern Ming Empire to surrender without a fight just based on this battle record. Kuang Ye's face was full of fighting spirit. "My lords, the 5-star troop is very aggressive this time. I heard that they are either on horseback or on bicycles and they move very quickly. In order to prevent them from using their advantage, I have decided to defend the Guangzhou prefecture in this battle and unite the army into one fist. We will use our advantage to fight them at the city gates." Good, this is a good idea. We'll combine our advantages and allow them to move too quickly. In the end, they'll still have to obediently come to the city and fight with us. Li Hani was the first to agree. The 2 generals had the same opinion, and those civil officials who didn't understand military tactics all expressed their agreement. The left envoy of Guangdong, Yang Xian, expressed that he would take care of the food reserves and ensure that the army had enough to eat. After the meeting, the Southern Ming Empire quickly took action. The Southern Ming Empire's army in the nearby cities received the order and quickly left the city to gather in the direction of the Guangzhou prefecture. In a short period of time, the Southern Ming Empire's military strength in the Guangzhou prefecture reached 450,000 soldiers. The 5-star army that was marching towards Guangdong also received intelligence from the spies in the various cities. They knew that the Southern Ming Empire's army was retreating to the Guangzhou prefecture and intended to fight a decisive battle with them. Immediately, they sped up their march and headed straight for the prefecture of Guangzhou. After a few months of training, the Third Army had regained its original personnel structure. The missing personnel were transferred from Crimson City and were all carefully trained by the 1st Division of the Cold Front. With the addition of these people, Wu Sheng's confidence skyrocketed. Now, he was just waiting for the right opportunity to fight the Southern Ming Empire. In Yang Xie's army, the Third Army's composition was the most complicated. They had infantry, cavalry, and firearms. This was also because the Third Army was formed under the pincer attack of the Ross Duchy and the Golden Horde. They were far away from the rear and couldn't get any supplies or personnel to replenish their forces. Fortunately, they had persevered until now and finally achieved results. The Third Army had grown from less than 8,000 soldiers to more than 50,000 soldiers. Now they could be described as having high morale and powerful combat strength. The Third Army was already so powerful, let alone the 2nd Division of the Cold Front. Although there were only about 10,000 of them, they were all made up of musketeers. It wasn't difficult for them to do so as they were all motorized troops. The 3-wheeled motorcycles that filled the entire 2nd Division allowed their movement speed to increase by more than 10 times. During this period of time, after Crimson City successfully built the first 3-wheeled motorcycle, they sped up the production process. In the end, they produced close to 10,000 motorcycles, all of which were allocated to the 2nd, 4th, and 5th Divisions of the Cold Front. Originally, the 2nd Division of the Cold Front needed to use bicycles to increase their speed. Now that they were motorized soldiers, they were filled with fighting spirit and only wanted to perform well on the battlefield to repay Bugnam of Gojoseon's kindness. Now that they had 2 strong armies, the 1st Division of the Russian Empire was not worth mentioning. Although they were all cavalry, they were not part of the Han army, so they were only used as reserves for this battle. Although Division Commander Ahuli was a little disappointed, he did not complain at all. Instead, he kept his subordinates under control and warned them that their opponents this time were the Han. Without orders, they were not to kill innocent people. Otherwise, no one would be able to save them. In addition, Yang Chendong had also come. Along with him were 5,000 black cavalry soldiers and 100,000 logistic soldiers. These were Han auxiliary soldiers who had undergone short training. Their role was not on the battlefield. Other than transporting supplies, they were mainly responsible for guarding prisoners and propagating the Yangxia policy. Obviously, Yang Chendong had already predicted the outcome of this battle before the battle even started. If they could not defeat the infantry of the Southern Ming army with firearms and cavalry, then the 5-star army did not want to unify the world. It was better for them to obediently stay in the city and wait for death. With firearms that were much more advanced than this era, Yang Chendong had already treated the Southern Ming as his own backyard. If it was not for the fact that he wanted to conquer this place with the smallest price, the army would have continued to advance after conquering the 3 provinces. What reason was there for a war between countries? That was just a lack of confidence. A true expert would not do such a thing. I'm stronger than you, so I want to take care of you. So what? Not satisfied? If not, then come and fight. Just like how the Yangxia conquered other countries, there was no need for a reason. He just needed to beat you until you could not take care of yourself. In the end, you would have no choice but to surrender. However, Yang Chendong believed that he was already very lenient towards the Southern Ming Empire, the land of the Han people. His original plan was to reform them and assimilate them at the same time. In the end, he would be able to take down the entire Southern Ming Empire without shedding a drop of blood. However, as more and more intelligence department telegrams were sent to him, he had no choice but to change his mind. When he saw the telegram that the Southern Ming Empire was preparing for war, it had caused the people to have no way of making a living. They were looking for strong men everywhere to gather food and military equipment. Most of the people were already at the point where they could no longer survive. Thus, he had no choice but to deal with the pain quickly and decided to conquer the Southern Ming Empire by force. Only then would they be able to take down the Southern Ming Empire in a shorter period of time and save the Han people. Chapter 1682. As for Chao Jixiang's matter, it was just a coincidence. This was equivalent to giving Yang Chendong an honorable reason. How could he not use it? Riding on the White Dragon, Yang Chendong charged towards Guangzhou City under the protection of the 5,000 black cavalry. At the same time, the vanguard of the 2nd Division of the Lung Vanguard had arrived at the city gate tower and started setting up camp 8 miles away from the city. Hundreds of light and heavy machine guns had been set up on the trenches that had been temporarily dug. Although there were only 2,000 people, there was no fear on Gao Xiang's face. In his heart, he still hoped that the South Ming army would take the initiative to attack. In that case, he would be able to make the first contribution. What was disappointing was that the South Ming army in the Guangzhou prefecture didn't seem to have any intention of doing anything when they arrived. General Guan Ying stopped the other generals who wanted to go out to battle. Obviously, he didn't care about the 2,500-star army that had arrived first, because his plan was bigger. Over the years, the South Ming army had developed. For example, they had created many cannons. Due to the limitations of their technology, their cannons could only fire 3 miles away and they used solid bullets. However, when 200 cannons were set up on the city walls, it gave people a sense of security. Guan Ying already had a plan in his mind. This time he would wait for the enemy to charge over. He only needed to defend. That way his cannons could be used to attack. He wanted to take down the 5-star army's prestige on the city walls and use this battle to tell the world that the 5-star army was not invincible. Just last night, Guan Ying received the news that his teacher, Kuang Yi, had passed away. He also knew that because of the news of Yang Xie's strength in the capital, the recruitment of soldiers was not effective. Many of the soldiers that were originally set up had disappeared. The 2.5 million soldiers that the South Ming had prepared were now only 1.5 million. They had lost 1 million soldiers. Guan Ying was naturally very sad about the death of his teacher. However, the battle was imminent and grief could not solve the problem. He had to think of a way to win this battle in order to better comfort his teacher's soul in heaven. At the same time, if they fought this battle well, it would strengthen the confidence of the southern Ming dynasty and the people. Only then would they be able to recruit more soldiers and fight a long battle with the five-star army. In the end, they would achieve the ultimate goal of not invading the southern Ming dynasty. On this point, Guanyin clearly knew his own limits. He knew that it was impossible for the South Ming Empire to defeat Yangxia. Disregarding everything else, the other party had taken over so much territory and stationed troops everywhere. Once all of them were called back, just the number alone was enough to scare people to death. Therefore he only asked for a draw. In the end, the southern Ming Empire would recognize Bugnam of Gojoseon as a legitimate country, and the southern Ming Empire would be able to govern itself. However, this goal was not so easy to achieve. To be safe, Guanyin chose to defend. He wanted to use the city walls to block the five-star army. Commander Gao Xiang waited until the next morning. After seeing that the southern Ming Empire had no intention of attacking, he knew that the other party would not take the initiative to attack. Immediately, he reported what had happened and his analysis to the division headquarters using an electric suit. Not long after, Yang Qindong also received the news. Haha, young master, this Guanyin has grown up. He can keep his composure. However, he thinks that he can stop our army with 450,000 soldiers. That's a bit of a fantasy. Beta Persei, who was accompanying him, also saw this telegram. He immediately looked down on Guanyin and laughed. Yang Lu had been killed. A white silk had ended his life. It could be considered a dignified death. At that time, Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, Yang San, Yang Si, and Yang Wu were all present. They could be considered brothers and they came to send him off. Although Yang Lu was dead, the impact of the incident had already happened. Other than Tiger's Mane, the other servants could not help but worry about their future. After all, such a thing had happened. If the young master was no longer close to them, it would be reasonable. Fortunately, Yang Qindong was only concerned about the incident and not the person. Yang Lu was dead, so in his eyes the matter was considered over. This time he still brought Beta Persei with him. As soon as this signal was sent, it completely calmed the hearts of the servants. It also let the other officials of Yangxia know that the servants were still servants. They were still trusted by Bugnam of Gojoseon. Some people who originally wanted to replace Yang Lu also gave up on this idea. The situation in Yangxia became stable again. Okay, Beta Persei, go and call Yu Mian over. Yang Qindong also smiled. Beta Persei's words on this matter were very much in line with his thoughts. In modern warfare, whoever had more people would not necessarily win, and whoever defended would have more advantages. The power and advanced weapons would ultimately determine the route of victory and defeat. Just like in the original historical spacetime on the battlefield of Normandy, a German machine gunner killed more than 1,000 Allied soldiers with a machine gun. This was enough proof. Of course, not all armies applied this model. For example, the soldiers of the People's Liberation Army in the future defeated their opponents one by one with a rifle. But this theory was still applicable to most of the enemies of the army. After a while, Yu Mian came in front of Yang Qindong. Speaking of which, the two had not seen each other for a long time. The last time they met, they even made a bet. It turned out that Yang Qindong won again. Today, the Far Eastern province had long become one of Yangxia's important granaries. There was a large area of fertile land, rich in forest resources and various minerals. It could be said that except for the cold climate, it was already perfect. Especially after the construction of the train tracks. In spring, summer and autumn, the people chose to work. In winter, they left their homes to travel or relax in the three eastern provinces. It was a beautiful life. It was equivalent to Yu Mian losing to Yang Qindong. This time, no one brought up the matter of the bet. They called Yu Mian to talk about the reconstruction of the southern Ming dynasty and persuading them to surrender. Yu Mian, with our powerful military strength, it won't take long for us to win on the battlefield. Persuading the officials of the southern Ming dynasty to surrender and the reconstruction work after the war will be handed over to you. How is it? Do you have any difficulties? Yu Mian was already in his 40s and was in the prime of his life. When he heard Yang Qindong's question, he immediately straightened his posture and said, replying to the sixth young master, I promise to complete the task. Yu Mian had this confidence because this time, there were 5,000 cadres from Rijing City accompanying him. These people were all cultured and experienced management talents. There were also 5,000 cadres from other Yangxia provinces. They had considerable experience in migration, land distribution, and city reconstruction. Adding on the fact that Rijing City had prepared enough food and necessities, Yu Mian was confident that he could complete this task. It had to be said that Yang Qindong's migration policy was really good. Because of the migration, the barriers between the different races were disrupted, and the opposing voices could not work together. Every time they went to a new place, they would face a group of unfamiliar people and even unfamiliar races. No matter how capable and ambitious they were in this kind of environment, they could only lower their heads and accept their fate. Not to mention the Yangtze did not disregard the people after the migration. They distributed land, houses, seeds, food and necessities and so on. They hoped that the people after the migration would have food to eat and houses to live in. Like this, who would think of rebelling? To most of the people they did not ask for much. As long as they had a place to settle down, they would be satisfied. As for the rise and fall of a race, that was something that only a few ambitious people would think about. It was not something that the common people should think about. It was because of this migration policy that there were very few rebellions in Yangtze's territory. Almost every piece of land that they occupied, other than having to pay a hefty price in the beginning to provide money, after a few years, this place would begin to exert its power and provide food and money to the Yang faction. This also helped the Yang faction to grow stronger and stronger. Of course, the prerequisite for this was that most of the people were uncultured. If it was the future where everyone was familiar with the history of their race, it would be difficult to carry out such a large-scale migration, and there would be endless problems. It was also because of this that the Yangtze started to popularize culture in their territory. The difference was that everyone, regardless of race, had to learn the Han culture, write Chinese and speak the Han language. This was tantamount to a cultural assimilation. Like this, many years later, everyone would only know about the Han culture, and would not know that there were so many different languages in the world. The more Yu Mian thought about this, the more he admired Yang Qindong. In fact, it was not just him. In the entire Yangtze, most of the Han officials admired Yang Qindong, and this admiration turned into respect. Yang Qindong did not feel much about this. He only knew that since he had come to this world and had brought Ditsang with him, he had to do something. It was just that the results were out of his expectations, but this kind of result was even better and he was even happier. After Yu Mian did not have any more questions, he quickly bid farewell and left. Yang Qindong rode the White Dragon, and the Black Cavalry went straight to the Guangzhou Prefecture. April 1468 AD. Under the Guangzhou Prefecture city, more than 100,000 five-star army were stationed here. The bright five-star flag fluttered in the wind, and from afar, it was a world of red flags. As more and more five-star army soldiers gathered, the South Ming army on the city gate tower continuously moved boulders, wooden sleepers, kerosene, bows and other things to the top of the city gate tower, as if they were going to defend to the death. With these resources, they were confident that the five-star army wouldn't be able to return and would suffer heavy losses. Guanyin even found Commander Li Hani, and proposed that if the five-star army failed to attack the city, they would send out an army to counterattack. All the war horses in the city were also mobilized, forming a total of 5,000 cavalrymen. When the time was right, they would counterattack with all their might and obtain the final victory of the Guangzhou Prefecture city. Chapter 1683. With a large pile of defensive equipment, sufficient soldiers, and enough provisions to last for a year, Guanyin had a calm and steady look on his face. He wanted to see what the five-star army, who had always been known to be invincible, would do at this moment. It was said that one's thoughts determined one's vision. Guanyin's scope was still too small. At most, he had a place in the southern Ming dynasty. Compared to Yang Shi, who had already conquered all of Asia and even had a navy that was advancing towards Europe and the Western countries, it was not an exaggeration to say that Guanyin was like a firefly compared to the bright moon. Just as Guanyin was thinking about how to defend, the five-star army's cannons were ready to assemble at the Guangzhou government. This time, the five-star army was using the newly developed 120mm field cannon. Compared to the 90mm field cannon which had a range of 10 miles and the 75mm field cannon which had a range of 6 miles, it could shoot up to 15 miles. The larger the caliber, the greater the lethality. Everything was difficult at the beginning. Once the beginning was made, the next step would be much easier. The lathes were constantly being updated. In addition, there were many new cannons in the warehouse for people to imitate and research. Currently, the progress of the cannons in the Crimson City was increasing rapidly. It was worth mentioning that the new weapons were mainly used on the Navy's ships for the conquest of the West. The new weapons allowed Yang Xie's military committee member and deputy commander of the Navy, Gao Xiong, to fight against the foreign races with greater ease. After a few months, They had already conquered the Cape of Good Hope and landed in Africa's Niger River. It was foreseeable that news of their victory would arrive soon. Yang Qindong had also thought of boarding a large ship and killing his way to the west. However, no one agreed to this suggestion. The sea was different from the land. Danger could come at any time. If something happened to Yang Qindong, no one would be able to take responsibility. Helpless, Yang Qindong could only give up on this idea. The 2nd Division of the Cold Front Division's cannons were pulled 5 miles away from the Guangzhou government. This distance was out of the range of the Southern Ming's red coat cannons. Accompanying the division commander, Xiao Feng, to inspect the cannons was a young man. Crown Prince Chang, please be careful. When he saw that the young man was actually carrying the ammunition box with the artillery soldiers, Commander Xiao Feng, who had never frowned in the face of so many enemies on the battlefield, broke out in cold sweat. The young man was Yang Bo. This time he had taken the initiative to come to the battlefield. Yang Qindong also agreed. If he wanted to inherit his great cause, he had to learn this lesson on the battlefield. Only by doing so would he know that victory was not easy to come by. Only by doing so would he be able to intimidate Yang Xie's 3 armies and the millions of soldiers that he would have in the future. In order to train Yang Bo, other than returning to Yang Qindong's side at night to report what he had seen and heard, he was allowed to roam freely in the army to observe what he was interested in. Under safe circumstances, no one was allowed to stop him. As a matter of fact, when Yang Bo heard that the artillery soldiers were about to attack, he took the initiative to come. This frightened Xiao Feng. He knew that this person was very precious. Not to mention that his life was in danger. Even if his skin was scratched, he would not be able to bear the consequences. Helplessly he could only accompany him. This caused the artillery regiment's commander, Lin Luan, to be very careful as he led a group of artillery regiment's officers to protect him. Alright, Division Commander Xiao, Regiment Commander Lin, go do what you are supposed to do. I am here to learn and experience, not to be protected. Yang Bo, who was already 12 years old, saw that there was nothing he could do with so many people surrounding him. He could not help but put down what he was doing and turn to look at Yang Bo and the others. Crown Prince Chang, but Xiao Feng and the others wanted to say something, but Yang Bo's face darkened. Follow my orders. This is a military order. You cannot disobey it. Needless to say, Yang Bo, who was wearing a custom-made military uniform that was a few sizes smaller, was quite impressive when he was angry. At the very least, he managed to intimidate Xiao Feng and the others. They had to obey military orders. After saluting in unison, they went back to doing what they were supposed to do. Ba Daojiang and Peng Yu led 200 black cavalry soldiers to watch from the side. Their faces were filled with gratification. The Crown Prince Chang's aura was getting stronger and stronger. It would not be long before he had the ability to inherit the 6th young master's legacy. This was just a small interlude. The cold vanguard soldiers were busy. Guan Ying received the news from the top of the Guangzhou Prefecture's city gate tower and was looking around. They had something similar to binoculars in their hands, but the quality was not as good as the 5-star armies. They could only see further. They are deploying the artillery. They are about 5 miles away from us. Our artillery cannot reach that far. Guan Ying put down his binoculars and frowned as he spoke. He knew the power of the artillery and knew that it was the 5-star army's forte. They were no match for them in this aspect. However, it did not matter. The main point of attacking a city was to take down the city. It was not a competition of whose artillery was more powerful. Your artillery could not possibly charge up the city gate tower like a human. In the end, they still had to rely on humans to climb up the city gate. Not to mention, Guan Ying had already arranged enough troops in the streets of the city. This was the embryonic form of urban warfare. There were quite a lot of people in the prefecture of Guangzhou at the moment. There were more than 450,000 soldiers. In addition to the civilians who rushed over from various prefectures, there were more than 1 million people. This was because there were many commoners who had left the southern Ming Empire for Chichen City. Otherwise, the number of commoners alone would have exceeded 2 million. Remember, when the enemy's artillery fire, you must find a place to hide. Do not run around. That will only increase the danger. Also, we don't need to arrange too many soldiers on the city gate tower for the time being. When the enemy's cannons have finished firing, the soldiers will rush up the city gate tower and give the 5-star army a fatal blow. As Guan Ying spoke, someone beside him was recording. After a while, these words would be transmitted to the ears of the various generals. Just from these arrangements, one could see that Guan Ying was indeed capable. At the very least, he knew how to avoid the spearhead. However, it was a pity that he had too little understanding of the power of the artillery. In other words, he had underestimated the power of the 5-star Army's artillery. This meant that he was destined to lose in the end. The artillery regiment was deployed. The artillery regiment was divided into 3 groups. They were respectively guarding the north, west, and south gates of the Guangzhou prefecture. Only the east gate was left. This was what the art of war referred to as surround 3 and block 1. If the enemy was left with a chance of survival, they would not risk their lives to fight back. Outside the east gate, the 3rd Corps and the 1st Division had already prepared an ambush. They were just waiting for the South Ming Army to escape from here. Then they would deal with them once and for all. After the artillery was set up, the ammunition was also transported. The sky was already dark. Yang Qindong decided to launch the artillery attack early in the morning. As such, the soldiers fell asleep early in the morning. Yang Bo, on the other hand, could not fall asleep. After thinking about it in bed, he went to Yang Qindong's main tent. Yang Qindong did not sleep. With his current body, he only needed to meditate for 2 hours when he was tired and let the qi in his body circulate through his body several times. After that, he would be full of energy again. He had already passed this set of techniques to Yang Qindong. Perhaps it was because of his physique that he had transmigrated to. Yang Qindong could cultivate qi and control it well. However, Yang Bo was still unable to do so. He still needed more time to practice. Yang Qindong, who had not slept, was looking at the telegrams sent from various departments. He would ponder from time to time. When he thought of something, he would write down some instructions. When Beta Persei said that Crown Prince Chang wanted to see him, he stopped writing and sat up straight. Yang Bo entered the tent and bowed respectfully. Then he called out, "Father." "Bo, it's already so late. Why aren't you sleeping? Are you too excited?" Yang Qindong waved his hand and called Yang Bo to sit beside him. "Father, Bo is not excited. I just don't understand some things," Yang Bo said with an expression of asking for advice. "What is it that you don't understand? Tell me about it." Yang Qindong had a fatherly smile on his face. He liked Yang Bo's attitude of asking for advice. There was nothing shameful about asking if he did not understand. On the contrary, pretending to know when he did not know would ruin things. "Yes." Yang Bo took the initiative to stand up and asked with an expression of learning, "Father, you once said that your greatest wish was to bring the Han people to the peak of the world, to bring harmony to the world, and to let the Han people live the best lives. However, if we were to bombard like this, wouldn't the Guangzhou prefecture be destroyed? Wouldn't the Han people in the city be killed as well? Wouldn't that be? What would that be?" Yang Bo did not say, but he believed that his father would understand his question. Very good. Bo's thoughts of pitying the people are good. However, it is impossible for there to be no deaths in a war. Most importantly, if we are able to eliminate the 450,000 soldiers of the Southern Ming Empire, it will play a positive role in our conquest of the Southern Ming Empire. Using this battle to determine victory and defeat will reduce the difficulty of our conquest. This is very worthwhile. Furthermore, be it the soldiers or the people in the city, they are not innocent. The soldiers were ordered to fight. If we don't kill them, they will kill us. As for the people, when we gave them the chance to leave from the various ports and head to Chichen City, many of them left obediently. However, there are still some who stayed behind. Do you know why? This. Yang Bo pondered for a moment before saying, "I'm afraid that the people who stayed behind do not trust us. They still have fantasies about the Southern Ming Empire." Very good, Bo is right. Since they do not trust us and they have made their own choice, they are our enemies. We cannot show mercy to our enemies, so it is not wrong to bombard them. Of course, they are Han people after all. If they did not help the Southern Ming Empire and chose to abandon the city and escape, Father will do his best to be merciful and not take their lives. However, if they did something wrong, they will be punished. All of their assets will be confiscated, and they will be put through labor for 1 to 3 years. After they are released, they will still be Han people and can enjoy the fruits of our labor. This is a reward and punishment. Chapter 1684. Such a detailed explanation made Yang Bo nod his head continuously. He finally understood his father's painstaking efforts. At this moment, the haze on Yang Bo's face disappeared. Instead, he bowed deeply. "Father, Bo will remember your words." Good. Yang Qindong patted Yang Bo's shoulder with a gratified expression. In fact, as Yang Qindong thought, The commoners who accompanied the South Ming army in the Guangzhou prefecture did indeed treat the five-star army as an opponent. This was not as simple as distrust. Among the commoners there were mainly tyrants. They had already received news that wherever the five-star army went, the rich would only be able to leave behind 20% of their wealth. This was something they could not accept. Although most of their wealth came from the great Ming dynasty's good policies and exploitation, this was also a kind of ability, wasn't it? Why should the wealth that they worked so hard to obtain be handed over to the Yangxia? They could not understand, so they wanted to be enemies with the five-star army. In order to let the South Ming army win the war, these tyrants even took out money and food to provide for the South Ming army. With such people, even if they died under artillery fire, Yang Qindong would not feel the slightest bit of heartache. Other than these tyrants, there were also some elderly people. They did not want to leave their homes. Even if they died, they wanted to die in their homeland. Of course, the proportion of such people was very small. There was also a group of scholars from the great Ming dynasty. They had learned the ways of Confucius and Mencius from a young age and were very knowledgeable. Under the great Ming dynasty system, bookworms like them had a very high chance of becoming government officials. However, once they were transferred to the Yang faction, they would no longer have any prospects for development. And so, these people stayed behind. But even if they stayed behind, when they saw the South Ming army practicing formations in the barracks before the war started, they still looked down on them and said, "They are really all brawn and no brains. Their actions are a disgrace to the educated." He was about to die, surrounded and unable to go anywhere, yet he still looked down on martial artists and soldiers. Even if such a person entered the Yangxia, he would still be reformed. Even if some of these people died, no one would feel sorry for them. In short, the people who stayed behind were all enemies of the Yang faction. Even if they were enemies, how could they be innocent under the fire of the cannons? The night passed uneventfully, and the sun rose as usual the next morning. The soldiers of the five-star army had a hot breakfast early in the morning. When it was 7 o'clock, the artillery soldiers were in position and the shells were loaded. Commander Lin Luan, who had the rank of senior colonel, Leng Feng's officers were all high-ranking officers, raised a small red flag and shouted loudly in front of everyone, "Target, Guangzhou Prefecture City Wall. Distance, 5 miles. Direction, to the left 004. +2. Reload. Delay fuse. Everyone get ready." As the red flag suddenly fell, Lin Luan shouted again, "Fire!" Boom! Cannonballs shot out of the barrel and headed straight for the prefecture of Guangzhou. After the cannons were fired from the west gate, the cannons were fired from the north gate and south gate as well. For a moment, the sound of cannons rumbled, causing the earth to tremble. The Guangzhou prefecture's city walls, which were marked as the attacking side, were instantly riddled with holes. As the cannonballs landed one after another, pieces of the walls fell off, and waves of cries and screams rang out. It was clear that under the bombardment, many southern Ming soldiers were hit, and the screams came from the mouths of these soldiers. The southern Ming soldiers couldn't even raise their heads after being hit by the blazing flames one after another. These country bumpkins finally saw the power of the Yangxia cannons. It was definitely not something their red coat cannons could compare to. The 200 red coat cannons that were set up in the surroundings were now in a miserable state. Under the barrage of cannon fire, it was smashed into a pile of scrap metal. It was impossible for it to display its strength. Hearing that the cannons were all destroyed, Guan Ying's face showed a look of heartache. However, the southern Ming generals beside him did not notice this. Instead, they kept flattering him. "Thanks to the general's great foresight, we had the soldiers withdraw from the city tower in advance. Otherwise, the losses this time would be too great. Yes, I really did not expect the five-star army's cannons to be so powerful. Of course, they did not expect that we had already made arrangements under the general's orders. This time these cannons are destined to return empty-handed. When they are done, it will be time for us to show our power." The generals were all talking at once, one after another. Those who did not know would think that they were already the victors. After half an hour of artillery fire, the explosions finally became weaker and weaker until they completely disappeared. Guan Ying's expression returned to normal. Although the red coat cannons that he had arranged were destined to not be of much use, it was still a great contribution to preserve the main force of the army. Now it was up to their own skills. "Come, send everyone up to the city tower. The cannons have stopped firing. The five-star army should be preparing to attack." For a moment, the sound of soldiers shouting could be heard everywhere. The southern Ming soldiers who had been hiding also began to rush up the city tower. However, when they really reached the city tower, they realized that there were no enemies in front of them. There was also no sign of the 5-star army. What's going on? Why didn't they charge? Many of the generals on the city tower were puzzled. Guanyin also did not immediately understand. He stood there and was vexed. Suddenly he thought of a possibility. He immediately shouted, "Not good, the 5-star army is going to continue firing. Quickly, everyone retreat." After shouting, Guanyin ignored the others and was the first to go down the city tower. At this moment, the cannons sounded again. The 5-star army's cannons had covered the city for the second time. As a person from the future, Yang Qindong was naturally more familiar with the use of cannons than other people. For example, the second cannons had already been used during the anti-Japanese war. This method would often cause the enemy to be unable to grasp the situation and would often cause them to pay a heavy price. Previously, Yang Qindong did not know that Guanyin had withdrawn the army in advance. The second cannons that he ordered were just a habit. It was this habit that caught the Southern Ming army off guard and caused them to suffer heavy losses. Many of the Southern Ming army still did not know what was going on. While they were still crowded on the city tower, the cannons rumbled and landed on the city wall. One by one, the Southern Ming army was blown away, killed, or injured. Just the second round of cannon fire had affected at least 4,000 Southern Ming soldiers. When the cannons stopped, the city tower was filled with broken limbs. Occasionally, there were people who were lucky enough to survive. However, they were also injured and crying in pain. At this time, there were no effective anti-inflammatory drugs. Once the injuries were too serious, they were basically waiting for death. Less than 4 hours after the battle started, there were already more than 1,000 injured people. Moreover, these people might not be able to be treated. Guanying's expression became even uglier. He was not afraid of the 5-star army attacking the city. With his preparations in advance, as well as the sufficient troops and food in the city, he was confident that he could fight a big battle with the 5-star army. Even if he could not win, he would be able to remain undefeated for a certain period of time. However, the feeling of not being able to see anyone and being hit by long-range cannons was really not good. It gave people a feeling that they could not use their strength. The cannons stopped for the second time. This time the 5-star army moved. However, they only sent out a few people. Each of them held a metal loudspeaker and came to a place 1 arrow away from the city tower. They shouted loudly, "Southern Ming army, listen up. The 5-star army is willing to accept the injured Southern Ming soldiers because we are all Han people. You just need to use a crane to lower them down from the city tower. Then our army will take them away for treatment to save their lives. There is no need to thank us. If you want to thank someone, thank your parents for giving birth to you in the land of Han people. Southern Ming army, listen up. The 5-star army is..." The shouts came again and again. Several people took turns to shout. There were people below the city gates. This way they could ensure that the Southern Ming soldiers in the city could hear them clearly. After another half an hour, the people who had shouted finally turned around and left. Seeing the 5-star army leave, a few generals looked at Guanyin worriedly and asked, "General, what should we do? How was this treating a patient?" This was clearly a psychological tactic. This was to buy people's hearts and also to mess up their morale. How could Guanyin not know what was going on? However, the other party did not attack the city. What could he do? Thinking that he could not mess up before attacking the city, Guanyin gritted his teeth and said, "Find the best doctors in the city and let them treat the injured. This will calm the soldiers down." This was clearly going against the 5-star army. It was also telling the soldiers that the 5-star army could save them. The Southern Ming Imperial Court could also save them. They just needed to work hard. As expected, this move was effective. When the other Southern Ming soldiers saw the injured being carried into various hospitals and the doctors running over to treat them, they were very happy. This also indirectly proved that if they were injured, they would not be abandoned. This meant that they had a higher chance of survival. After breaking the psychological breakdown of the 5-star army, before they could take a breather, the sound of cannons rang out again. However, this time the cannons did not land on the city tower. Instead, they fired towards the Guangzhou prefecture. For a moment, the sound of cannons could be heard everywhere in the city. Because some places were made of wood, they were directly set on fire. The cannons directly extended into the city and caught the Southern Ming army off guard. Without enough preparation, they suffered heavy losses. Chapter 1685. This was because the cannonballs did not hit any of the stored supplies. For example, flammable items such as kerosene. Otherwise, who knew what would happen? After another half an hour, the sound of cannonballs stopped. Then, some people holding metal horns came and began to shout at the foot of the city. In order to stabilize the morale of the army, Guanyin had no choice but to send the wounded to the hospital for treatment. However, there was news from the hospital that they had already treated 3,000 to 4,000 patients in half a morning. They had already reached their limit. If there were more patients, they would not be able to treat them. This answer made Guanying's face instantly turn black. Didn't this mean that if the 5-star army continued to bombard the city, the morale of his army would be shaken? Just as Guanying was thinking about what to do, the 5-star army retreated. In exchange, there was another rumbling sound of cannonballs. The southern Ming army suffered heavy losses again. Thousands of people were killed and thousands of people were injured. Finally, it was noon. The 5-star army's bombardment stopped. Looking from afar, smoke rose in spirals. It was obvious that they were eating lunch. In contrast, although the southern Ming army in the city had prepared their meals, there were not many people who had an appetite. Especially when they saw many soldiers and civilians lying on the streets and wailing. When they saw that there was no doctor to take care of them, some of the soldiers' faces began to change. It was as if they could see their future. The morale of the army began to waver. Bastard, the 5-star army is not a real hero. They don't dare to fight us with real swords and spears. Guanying roared in anger. This caused the other generals to lower their heads. At this time, no one was willing to speak. Seeing that no one was speaking, Guanying became even angrier. Fine, since they don't want to come, then we will go out. Generally, this time it's up to you. Don't worry, after the cavalry rushes out, I will immediately send the infantry to protect your flanks. This time we will catch the 5-star army unprepared. Good. Li Hani nodded heavily. This feeling of being beaten without being able to hit anyone was really unpleasant. He also thought that it was time to fight back. Guanying did not expect that the trump card he had prepared would be used so soon. But at this moment he really couldn't think of a better way. The southern Ming dynasty's 5,000 cavalry began to make their preparations. However, it was not entirely accurate to say that there were 5,000 cavalrymen. After the 3 rounds of cannon fire in the morning, the cavalrymen also suffered some losses. About 100 of them were injured by the cannonballs. However, for a team of 5,000 people, losing 100 or so people was not a big deal. Li Hani was clad in armor and held a long spear in his hand. He looked very majestic. The cavalry behind him also had all kinds of weapons. For example, long sabers, spears, halberds, axes, and so on. Just from this point alone, this cavalry wasn't very proper. This was because everyone knew that if cavalry wanted to develop their advantages, they had to be flexible, quick, and take advantage of the situation. A sharp, light, and nimble saber was the best weapon. In comparison, the longer a weapon was, the more restrictions it would face. However, at this point, no one cared about that. They only wanted to charge out and catch the 5-star army off guard to take revenge for the cannon fire in the morning. It would be best if they could force the 5-star army back on the right track and let them attack the city. Afterwards, both sides would fight back and forth. That would be perfect. Under the command of Li Hani, the 5,000 cavalrymen made their preparations. The drawbridge at the west gate of the Guangzhou prefecture was also quickly raised. Following which, the earth began to shake and the cavalry began to charge. The city gate suddenly opened and countless cavalrymen rushed out. When this formation appeared, Yang Qindong, who was standing beside him, couldn't help but tense up. This was the first time he had experienced this kind of situation. It was impossible to say that he wasn't nervous. However, when he looked at his father and the other generals, he noticed that there was almost no change in their expressions. Although the battle was approaching, they were not nervous in the slightest. Generally, people who had experienced hundreds of battles would be calm the closer they were to the battle. They would be able to talk and laugh. After fighting so many battles, they would get used to it. On the other hand, Yang Qindong was already prepared for the possible reaction of the South Ming army. Did they really think that the trenches in front of the city gate were dug for nothing? Did they really think that the cold front soldiers in the trenches were just decorations? In front of the west gate, the cold front soldiers who were chatting in the trenches heard the sound of horse hooves. 1st Regiment Commander Gao Xiang quickly extinguished the cigarette in his hand and raised his head to look outside. This time he didn't even need to use binoculars to see clearly. Haha, they are finally here. They are coming from our 1st Regiment's defensive line. It seems that our luck is not bad. Brothers, immediately enter the formation and prepare to fire. Laughing loudly, Gao Xiang arrived in front of a heavy machine gun. He made preparations while shouting loudly. The trenches were 4 miles away from the city gate. A distance of 2,000 meters could be said to be covered in the blink of an eye. However, even though they were fast, there were still bullets faster than them. Seeing that the enemy had exited the city gate and was less than 2 miles away from them, Commander Gao Xiang started counting down silently in his heart. 5, 4, 3, 2. Fire. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. The first to sound was the heavy machine gun in his hand. Following that, gunshots continued to sound, accompanied by the sound of rocket launchers exploding from time to time, greatly suppressing the charging formation of the cavalry. Under the barrage of gunfire and cannon fire, the southern Ming cavalry that charged forward were cut down like chives, falling to the ground one after another. In order to display their advantage, Li Hani even formed a charging formation and gathered the cavalry together. This originally allowed them to be like a knife that stabbed into the enemy's camp. However, when faced with the powerful firearms of the 5-star army, this method was equivalent to helping the flintlock soldiers and was equivalent to gathering together to become live targets. As the saying goes, the faster you charge, the faster you die. The closer you charge, the faster you die. When batches of cavalrymen were hit by the spears and fell to the ground, they were trampled by the cavalrymen behind them and turned into a pile of meat paste. The momentum of the southern Ming army's cavalry began to slow down. Under the blockade of hundreds of light and heavy machine guns, less than 5,000 cavalry could not get close at all. Needless to say, rocket launchers, grenades, and other weapons were fired continuously, as if they were free of charge. Retreat, retreat quickly. After nearly half of the cavalry died in a short period of time, Li Hani's face became very distressed. He could not bear such losses and finally made the decision to retreat. As soon as his voice fell, the cavalry turned their horses back. However, if they wanted to go back now, how could they do it without paying a price? The gunshots continued, and the cavalry continued to fall from their horses. About 1,000 cavalry died in battle, and the remaining South Ming cavalry hurriedly fled into the city. After entering the city, Li Hani's tears fell. There were 5,000 cavalry just now, but in just a short while, there were less than 2,000 cavalry left. They did not even touch a hair of the enemy. This battle was really useless. Guan Ying had already arrived at the city tower, but he did not have any intention of blaming Li Hani. If he was the one leading the troops just now, he would have ordered the army to retreat. After all, the number of cavalry was too small. If there were 100,000 cavalry, he might have taken the risk. General. After seeing Guan Ying, the tears on Li Hani's face had yet to dry. Sai, go and rest first. We will think of other ways. Guan Ying comforted him. Before he could think of another solution, another round of bombardment began. The city was once again in a mess. Countless soldiers and civilians were killed or injured. In the afternoon there were 3 rounds of cannon fire, 3 rounds of shouting, and finally it was nighttime. It seemed that they could have a good rest. After a tiring day, Guan Ying, who was mentally exhausted, was also preparing to go to bed and rest. However, at this moment the cannon sounded once again. Amidst the booming sounds, the Guangzhou prefecture became lively once again. Not good, the 5-star army is approaching the southern gate. Quickly go up the city tower. Amidst the chaos, a shout suddenly sounded. This made Guan Ying, who had just left his room, look serious. Then he led his guards and rushed up the southern gate tower. When Guan Ying went up the city tower, the 5-star army had already retreated. The facts proved that the other party had only sent out a small number of troops. When they saw that the situation was hopeless, they retreated. However, it reminded Guan Ying that the 5-star army would not only bombard the city but also steal the city. Pass down the order. Order the generals to take turns to guard the city. We must not let the other party succeed in stealing the city. Guan Ying rubbed his temples and said with a tired face. In the 5-star army's barracks outside the Guangzhou prefecture, Yang Bo still had an excited look on his face. The battle during the day, especially the scene of the southern Ming cavalry being killed, had really stimulated him. As the sky was already dark, he was still unable to sleep. Thus, he simply went to his father's tent and asked about things that interested him. Father, did we not succeed in stealing the barracks? Why didn't we send more troops and use cannon fire to cover it? Bo, stealing the barracks is fake. There is no need for us to do such a risky thing. By doing so, we are reminding the other party that we are strong and that they will be on guard. After a while, they will have no choice but to deal with us. This will make them even more tired. Not only will they be physically tired, but they will also be mentally tired. This will play a very positive role in accelerating their collapse. So that's how it is. Yang Bo nodded as if he understood. Bo, you must remember that the lives of soldiers are the most important. If you don't have to put your life on the line, do your best to use other methods. This is especially true for the Han people. War is a kind of knowledge and there are too many ways to do it. We need to constantly learn. Yang Chendong said earnestly. He was very optimistic about his successor and had great expectations for him. Chapter 1686. Yang Bo nodded heavily. On this day he truly witnessed the cruelty of the battlefield. Although he could not enter the city and could not see the tragic scene in the Guangzhou prefecture, he could still imagine it. Just like what his father Xinri said, since these people chose to be enemies with Yang Xie, then regardless of whether they were soldiers or civilians, they were all enemies. Yang Xie could not be soft-hearted towards his enemies. Since Yang Xie had powerful cannons, why not use them? To be able to obtain victory and reduce the number of casualties, this was definitely the best choice. On this night, Yang Chendong asked a lot of questions and Yang Chendong explained a lot. This suitable successor was on his way to becoming an outstanding successor. On the same night, the Guangzhou prefecture was filled with wailing sounds. Compared to before, everyone's mood was obviously much lower now. Especially the wounded soldiers who had already been abandoned. Since there were not enough doctors, they were gathered together. Their only treatment was that someone would make porridge for them. As for whether their injuries would become inflamed and whether they could survive, it would depend on their fate. When they were surrounded by a group of poor people, a group of injured people, this kind of sadness would be infinitely magnified. It was unknown who it was that suddenly shouted, "Since the 5-star army is willing to accept us, and is willing to provide us with treatment conditions, then why don't you let us go? Yes, we are already useless. We can only wait for death if we stay here. You should let us go." As soon as the voice fell, it was immediately echoed by other people. "Let us go, we want to live. We just don't want to die, sob sob sob." Shouts, cries, curses and pleas rose and fell one after another. Soon it filled the entire area. When the shouts spread out, the soldiers who were walking outside were shocked. More people also felt sympathy for them. It was as if they could see themselves tomorrow. These South Ming soldiers thought that the wounded soldiers should be sent out of the city. Everyone had the right to live, right? Due to the lack of information, the South Ming army here did not know that the 5-star army had used the same method to deal with Bai Ming's hundreds of thousands of troops and finally defeated them. However, as their commander, Guaning knew about this matter. He could even imagine that once he agreed, there would be more injured soldiers appearing in the city for no reason. As for where those scars came from, it was likely that it was man-made and it was just a way to survive. Thinking of the possible outcome, Guaning naturally wouldn't agree to send the wounded out to the 5-star army. "Men, bring my bodyguards to the sick area and warn those people. If they dare to talk nonsense again, they will be punished according to military law. At the same time, tell them that the doctor will be here soon. Tell them to be patient. Also, immediately send people out of the city to ask for help from the capital. Tell them that we need reinforcements and doctors." Guaning couldn't guarantee that the request for help would be effective, but he still had to do what he should do. Otherwise, if the morale of the troops was broken, it would be difficult to lead them. Immediately, a messenger left the Guangzhou government. They chose to leave from the East Gate because it seemed that there weren't any 5-star army stationed there. However, what made people happy was that this messenger openly jumped over the 5-star army's defense line. It was obvious that the 5-star army wasn't afraid of them asking for help. "Good news, General, our messenger safely left." Guangdong's chief of the left, Yang Xian, received the news and excitedly ran over to tell Guaning. Guaning was calm, but he had a bad feeling in his heart. It seemed that the 5-star army didn't care about his actions at all. They clearly wanted to eat him up. Since that was the case, then he had to persevere and see if there was still a chance to counterattack. Perhaps the other 2 provinces would defeat the 5-star army and come to help him. As long as there were reinforcements, they would be able to kill their way out and surround the 5-star army outside the city like a dumpling. The night passed in fear and trepidation. Every half an hour there would be cannonballs entering the city from outside. Occasionally, there would be small groups of 5-star army attacking the city, causing the Southern Ming army to be extremely annoyed. When the sun rose, most of them had dark circles under their eyes and looked very tired. Boom boom boom. Boom boom boom. After breakfast, the large-scale cannonball started again. Unlike the small skirmishes at night, the cannonballs during the day were much more intense. In just one morning, after 3 waves of cannonballs, there were more than 5,000 injured soldiers in the city and more than 3,000 dead. The reason why there was so much damage was because the 5-star army's cannonballs were much fiercer than yesterday. Secondly, there were too many Southern Ming army soldiers in the city. Sometimes, A single cannonball could kill a few people and injure a dozen or more. Under such attacks, the southern Ming army began to lose a lot of soldiers. There was no need to talk about the dead as they could no longer speak and had already become history. However, those who were still alive and injured were really a headache. They kept wailing, which was a huge blow to the morale of the army. Especially when the five-star army outside the city would send people to persuade them to surrender after every half an hour of cannonballs, saying that they were willing to take in the injured soldiers. This was like an outlet for everyone to vent their frustrations. More and more injured soldiers began to clamor to leave the city. Even though Guan Ying sent out his personal guards and even promised these injured soldiers that he had already asked for help from the imperial court and that more doctors would come soon, the problem was still not solved. This was because in the span of last night and this morning, there were more than 200 injured soldiers who died because they did not receive treatment in time. Looking at their comrades who were shouting the same slogan as them dying in front of them, the other injured soldiers did not care about anything else in order to survive. They all shouted loudly and made the same demands and slogan. After another afternoon of cannonballs, there were thousands more injured soldiers. When their group reached more than 10,000 people, the slogan was so loud that it could be heard clearly in any part of the city. General Li Hani had a bitter expression as he walked into Guan Ying's temporary residence. There were some words that he had to say. Guan Ying received Li Hani in the main hall. When he saw the other party's dark expression, he knew what the other party was going to say. He shook his head and said, "General Li, this general understands your intentions, but you really can't do this. Don't tell me you want to watch these injured soldiers die?" Li Hani finally could not hold back the anger in his chest. Among these injured soldiers, there were actually many from the Wide Sea Guards. They used to be his comrades. Now that they were going to die from injuries as a general, he naturally did not feel good. "Calm down, bear with it. How about this, give me 3 more days and see the situation first." Guan Ying did not immediately agree, but he did not refuse either. He was very clear that a general like Li Hani was very influential. If he joined forces with others to force him to abdicate, the situation would be the worst. Therefore he could not directly refuse. The reason why he said to wait for 3 more days was mainly because he was hoping for a fluke. For example, was the 5-star army about to run out of ammunition? Bombarding like this every day consumed a lot of gunpowder. Perhaps they could not hold on any longer? Or perhaps the injured soldiers had thought it through, or everyone had gotten used to their cries. More importantly, he had already sent people out to look for reinforcements. Even if the imperial court's reinforcements would not arrive so quickly, as long as they could bring him news of reinforcements, it would be enough to motivate him and give him a reason to hold on. In short, he would drag it on for as long as he could. The situation might change at any time. Since Guan Ying had already said so, what else could Li Hani say? The imperial edict clearly stated that the Battle of the Guangzhou Prefecture had to follow Guan Ying's orders. If that was the case, he would wait for 3 more days. The bombardment continued, as did the persuasion to surrender. Yang Qindong did not order the soldiers to attack the city. He only continued to bombard the city with cannons. The situation on the battlefield was also somewhat lukewarm. Compared to the battlefield in front of the Guangzhou Prefecture, the Nanchang Prefecture was about to fall into chaos. Jiangxi consisted of Nanchang Prefecture, Guangxing Prefecture, Raozhou Prefecture, Nankang Prefecture, Jiujiang Prefecture, Ruizhou Prefecture, Yuanzhou Prefecture, Linjiang Prefecture, Fuzhou Prefecture, Jianchang Prefecture, Jian Prefecture, Ganzhou Prefecture, and Nan'an Prefecture. One was San Prefecture, Ning Prefecture. There were 77 counties below. Due to the large territory, although it was not the fragrance of fish and rice, nor was it a heavily taxed area of the southern Ming Empire, it was still a strategic location. This time, the southern Ming Empire had sent 200,000 soldiers here. In addition to the 100,000 soldiers from the original province, there was a total of 300,000 soldiers. Although it was not as strong as the 450,000 soldiers of the Guangzhou Prefecture, it was still a strong military force. Although Jiangxi's secretary of the left, Li Qing, was very nervous, he was relieved when he learned that the 5-star army had only sent a little over 100,000 soldiers. The reinforcements sent by the imperial court were led by General He Ku. When the command of the 300,000 soldiers was handed over to him, one could clearly see that he was excited. He Ku was a veteran general in the army. He was in his 40s and he was at his most mature and stable age. However, the moment he held military power, he unknowingly became arrogant. He Ku, who did not come from a good background, had relied on his own efforts to get to where he was today. Because of this, he desired power more than others. Now that he finally had power in his hands, he wanted to perform well. Especially when he learned that the 5-star army only had a little over 100,000 soldiers, which was a third of his forces, he decided to take the initiative to attack. The 300,000 soldiers were organized into 6 square formations by Hiku. Each formation had 50,000 soldiers. 3 of them were in charge of facing the enemy head-on, 1 was in charge of attacking from the back, and the other 2 were in charge of flanking the enemy. Once they formed an encirclement, it would be time for them to attack from all sides. This matter was decided. In the past, when Hiku led troops to suppress bandits, he did this. Reality proved that this method was very effective. Chapter 1687. With a single order, the 300,000 southern Ming soldiers moved separately. Such a large formation was naturally seen by Yang Xie's spies in Nanchang. Following this, a telegram was sent over to the commander of the world's #1 cavalry army, Tian Hu, who was also a member of the military council. Now that Tian Hu had entered the military council, his position was no longer just the commander of the world's #1 cavalry army. What he needed to do was to look at the overall situation and guide it. Naturally, this time he was the leader of the army in Nanchang. When the telegram was sent to him, a burst of laughter was heard. Good, good. This Hiku really knows me well. It was no wonder that Tian Hu was so happy. When he learned from the telegram that the southern Ming army in Guangzhou was like a tortoise hiding in the city, Tian Hu thought that the enemy in Nanchang would do the same. If that was the case, the world's #1 cavalry army would not have the chance to show off their strength. They would still have to rely on the guns and cannons of the cold front. However, he did not expect that the enemy would choose to take the initiative to attack. Wasn't this exactly what he wanted? After a few months of rest, the world's #1 cavalry army was not only filled with soldiers, but some of the older soldiers had also retired. Now the entire army was filled with men between the ages of 18 and 30. It could be said that their strength was at its peak. If there was something that they lacked, it would be the experience of life and death on the battlefield. Originally, they thought that it would be good if they did not encounter any soldiers or bandits along the way. They could also train their soldiers. Who would have thought that such a large number of enemies would be sent to them? How could they not be happy? Although this bone was indeed a bit big and fat, the world's #1 cavalry army had always been strong. Moreover, with cavalry against infantry, even if the enemy outnumbered them by a few times, Tian Hu was still confident that he could take them down. Tian Hu gathered the 5 division commanders under him and began to plan a battle strategy against the 300,000 enemies. According to Tian Hu's plan, Taimu Er's division and Lu Duo's division would be the vanguard. They had to create the momentum of the main force to inflict heavy damage to the enemy and attract the enemy's attention. 3rd Division Hu Jiner's division would be the left flank, 4th Division Su Kada's division would be the right flank, and 5th Division Yu Zhong's division would be the rear flank. In the temporary tent, Tian Hu had his hands on his waist. He was wearing the military uniform of a 2nd-rank general, and his 4 golden beads were shining brightly. 3-rank general with 3 stars, 2nd rank with 4 stars, and 1st-rank generals with 5 stars. This was a military rank that he had received after becoming a member of the military commission. Brothers, I'm sure everyone knows that the world's #1 cavalry army is going to expand into a group army. When the time comes, all 5 of you here will be army commanders. This will also be the last battle before our #1 army expands into a group army. I hope that all of you can show us our prowess. Isn't it just 50,000 against 300,000? Let me tell you, our opponents are all infantrymen, and most of them are rookies who have never seen blood before. You can definitely fight 1 against 6. Now, let me ask you, do you have the confidence? Yes. Taimu and the others shouted loudly. They knew clearly that this was not only their last battle before becoming army commanders, but also their best chance to show off in front of Tian Hu. Think about it, with a member of the military commission as their direct superior, how big was this thigh? If they didn't show off now, when would they be able to? As for fighting 1 against 6, even if it was cavalry against cavalry, they could easily fight 1 against 3 or even 1 against 4 with their 7-star crossbows and dual blade techniques. Now, with cavalry against infantrymen, it was just 1 against 6. It wasn't difficult at all. Not to mention, as long as they performed well and fought resolutely, the South Ming army, who had never seen blood before, would easily collapse. At that time, not to mention 300,000, even 500,000 or more wouldn't be their opponents. Good, everyone go and prepare. Make use of the time to eat and drink. We will attack in 4 hours. Tianhu laughed loudly and said confidently. After arranging for his subordinates to prepare, the commander of the 5th Division, Xiao Yining, and the commander of the 3rd Division, Qi Wen, walked into the main tent together. As soon as they met, Xiao Yining complained, "Commander, it's not that bad. The world's #1 cavalry army eats meat, but we also need to drink soup, right?" The Xiao family's attitude was very humble. If it wasn't for the fact that Tianhu was the commander of the world's #1 cavalry army, he might not have even looked them in the eye. If it wasn't for the fact that Tianhu was the commander of the world's #1 cavalry army, he might not have even looked them in the eye. But now it was different. Tianhu was one of the 5 members of the military commission. He was 100% the commander. If he didn't like the cold front, he could pick on them. Now he had no choice but to lower his head. Even Xiao Yining had such an attitude, let alone Qi Wen, a surrendered general. Although he had made a great contribution to the 5-star army and was recognized by Yang Qindong, he was also put in an important position. He was even included in the Han nationality book. However, he was very clear that in front of Tianhu and Xiao Yining, the absolute main force of the 5-star army, he was still an outsider. Tianhu was in a good mood. He looked at Xiao Yining and spoke more politely. "Sigh, since Commander Xiao knows that this might be the last time the world's #1 cavalry army makes an appearance, isn't that enough to satisfy our request? Also, the cold front is about to expand soon. Didn't the Navy expand by 12 divisions before? Let me tell you, it's your army's turn next." Because he was a member of the military commission, Tianhu naturally knew some things in advance. Because the matter had already been reported to Yang Qindong and had been approved, it wasn't a mistake to tell Xiao Yining in advance. As soon as he said this, Xiao Yining's attention was diverted. "Is that so? Commander, how many divisions should our cold front expand? Is there a military establishment?" A soldier who didn't want to be a general wasn't a good soldier. Xiao Yining's experience was also very old. For someone like him, if he wanted to leave the cold front, he could easily become a commander in another army. It wasn't impossible for him to even become a commander of a group army. However, after becoming familiar with the strength of the cold front, who would be willing to lead a ragtag army? They could only wait for a promotion within the cold front. Unfortunately, in the past few years, the other armies had been expanding. Some turned from regiments to divisions, some turned from divisions to armies, and some even turned into group armies. However, the cold front didn't expand because it wanted to maintain enough fighting power. It wasn't easy for them to expand during the new year, but they only expanded the cold front. They had 12 more divisions, which meant they had 3 more armies. This gave Xiao Yining and the other commanders of the cold front a glimmer of hope and envy. They originally thought that the cold front was expanding because they were forced to enter the west. Who would have thought that the cold front was also expanding? Didn't this mean that there would be a commander position waiting for him? How could he not be anxious and excited? The specific expansion plan still needs to be discussed in detail. After all, the cold front is the most elite army. Tianhu shook his head. It wasn't that he didn't want to say it, but that he didn't know either. This was because Yang Qindong had only approved Lu Lingfeng's plan to expand the army, but the exact number of people and how many divisions or armies were still to be discussed. Although Xiao Yining looked disappointed, he knew that the expansion plan was already set in stone. This already made him very satisfied. He didn't mention the fact that the cold front wasn't going to be part of this battle. After dealing with Xiao Yining, Tianhu looked at Qi Wen, who still had the rank of senior colonel, and saluted. "Commander Qi, wait for 2 hours after the 1st Sky Cavalry Regiment charged out. You can go." "Yes, Commander." Qi Wen felt bitter. He knew that the Meng 3 masters were going to clean up the battlefield. Although they couldn't eat meat, if they performed well, they would still be rewarded. Moreover, their brothers wouldn't have to take risks. Qi Wen was quite satisfied with this result. After dealing with the 2 commanders, Tianhu went straight to the kitchen. He didn't know how long the upcoming battle would take, so he had to fill his stomach in advance to have the strength to kill the enemy. At this time, General He didn't know that his actions were being watched by the 5-star army and the strongest cavalry regiment, the 1st Sky Cavalry Regiment. At this moment he was still leading the army forward. He had already looked at the map and chose a place called Lijiapur as the battlefield. There was only one official road that allowed people to pass through. On both sides of the official road were high slopes. The official road was wide enough for the army to spread out in formation and was suitable for an ambush. For the sake of safety and secrecy, the South Ming army set off before dawn. By the time they arrived at Lijiapur, it was already noon. The soldiers were very tired from the journey. Normally, Hiku should have ordered them to prepare for the battlefield. However, after considering the soldiers' request, he ordered them to cook to solve the problem of their stomachs. If Hiku could immediately take advantage of the terrain and prepare for the arrival of the 5-star army, they would still have a chance to win this battle. After all, they had the advantage of numbers and terrain. It was a pity that he wasted such a good opportunity. When the scouts at the front reported that the main cavalry of the 5-star army was less than 10 li away, Hiku became anxious. He immediately ordered the army to stop eating and enter the battlefield. After knowing that it was cavalry, he ordered people to quickly take out the stakes and other things to prepare. They were a group of new soldiers who had never been on the battlefield before. In a hurry, everyone was a bit flustered. Many people sprained their feet because they ran too fast. Before the battle even started, there were already people who were injured. This caused Hiku to curse out loud. Needless to say, the first group to appear was Teimuer's 1st Division and Lu Duo's 2nd Division. With the idea of being bold, they didn't do much scouting along the way. When the scout cavalries in the front reported back that they saw smoke above Li Jiapa, the 2 division commanders exchanged glances with each other before chuckling. With their many years of battle experience, they could feel that Li Jiapa should be the pocket formation that the South Ming army had set up for them. Chapter 1688. They didn't even know that they couldn't light a fire while marching. It seemed like the ability of the Southern Ming Army's commander was only average. How could Teimuer and Lu Duo know that Hiku's biggest battle was to suppress bandits? Naturally, he didn't need to be so careful when doing such a thing. Immediately send someone to report to the military commander. Tell him that the enemy is most likely setting up an ambush at Li Jiapa. In order to catch them off guard, our 1st and 2nd divisions have decided to take the initiative to attack. I hope that the military commander will immediately arrange for the other divisions to surround them. The 1st Division commander, Teimuer, said to the telegraphist beside him. After the telegraphist finished recording the contents and left, Teimuer said to Lu Duo, "How about it? Do you want to compete? All right. Let's see who can fight more fiercely and kill more people." Ah. Lu Duo laughed, unwilling to pass on his responsibility. "Okay, inform the rest to prepare for battle. Put on your armor and take out your Big Dipper crossbows." Teimuer laughed heartily as he galloped on his horse. In an instant, a cloud of dust rose with the wind and surged towards Li Jiapa like a tornado. On the official road, the sky was filled with yellow sand. Looking from afar, it was impossible to tell how many cavalrymen there were. One could only feel the number of cavalrymen from the sound of the war horses galloping on the ground. As the saying went, 10,000 cavalrymen were boundless. This kind of formation couldn't be described with words. General Hiku, who was setting up an ambush at Li Jiapa, became excited when he heard the rumbling sounds of the war horses galloping on the ground. He knew that the main force of the 5-star army had arrived. This meant that his chance to make a big contribution had arrived. Hiku, who was too excited, didn't pay attention to the reactions of the Southern Ming soldiers beside him. These people were either born in the military and worked in the fields and rarely received training. Some of them were still working with hoes a while ago, but now they were given swords and sabers to become soldiers. It was impossible to expect them to perform well. When they heard the rumbling sounds of the war horses galloping on the ground, many people were already covered in cold sweat. Some were even trembling in fear and didn't know what to do. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that the world's #1 cavalry army was an army that had been through hundreds of battles. Whenever there was a big battle to be fought, his figure could be seen. Together with Yang Qindong, they fought in the north and south, conquering vast territories. Many of these cavalrymen could be described as murderous. The number of non-humankind cavalrymen and infantrymen who died in their hands was countless times greater than the number of jihaos. Even Wallace Yeshen had to flee at the sight of this elite cavalry. Hiku actually wanted to use infantry to intercept them. He was truly ignorant and fearless. He did not know how to write the word death. In the end, it wasn't entirely Hoku's fault. After all, the biggest mission he had completed before was to exterminate the bandits. When Yang Xie's 5-star army made a name for themselves and continued to expand their territory, how could there be any enemies around the Southern Ming Empire? Even if they wanted to go to war, they didn't have the chance. He was only a general in charge of exterminating the bandits. How could he know the power of the war horses? In Hoku's eyes, it was the same as what he knew. Once the Imperial Army appeared, the horse bandits and mountain bandits would surrender. The 5-star army was also human. They should do the same. His strength wasn't strong and he underestimated the strength of his opponent. This was already the end for Hoku. It was just that he didn't know it yet. The 5-star army's cavalrymen arrived very quickly. The vanguard didn't hesitate to plunge into Li Jiapa. Then they saw the southern Ming Empire's army on the official road not far away. Looking from afar there were many people. It could even be described as a sea of people. Hundreds of barricades were placed in the middle of the official road. Many southern Ming archers were already prepared to shoot. It was as if this was a trap and whoever fell into it would be dead for sure. It was obvious that this was an ambush. However, in the eyes of Teimu and Lu Duo, these were just decorations. They didn't feel the slightest bit of fear. On the contrary, they even increased the speed of their war horses. The vanguard cavalrymen had already taken out their iron hooks and charged towards the barricades in front of them. Good, they're all in. They're all in. Hoku was excited. He was afraid that the enemy would immediately escape when they saw this formation. If that was the case, his ambush would be useless. If he really let the infantrymen and cavalrymen fight on the plains, even if he hadn't seen the power of cavalrymen, he knew that the situation would be disadvantageous for him. The cavalrymen had indeed entered the encirclement, but they didn't panic. Many iron hooks were thrown out and the barricades in front of them were dragged to the side. The world's first cavalry army had done this countless times. They were so familiar with it that they were as agile as their limbs. Don't let them remove the barricades. Shoot. The 5-star army's cavalryman's reaction was beyond Hoku's expectations. He thought that these barricades would cause damage to the cavalrymen and even cause chaos. If that was the case, he would be able to take advantage of the situation and kill them. But now, seeing the barricades being removed one by one, the main road was about to be cleared. The cavalrymen would be left with nothing but flat plains. He was anxious and didn't care if he was within the range of the arrows. He shouted loudly. The South Ming Army's recruits were already frightened by the might of the 5-star Army's cavalrymen. They were just used to listening to their general's orders. They didn't care whether the arrows would hit their opponents or not. They only knew that releasing the arrows could boost their courage and scare the enemy. That was enough. At that moment, countless arrows flew out from the front. But because the distance was too far, they couldn't reach the 5-star Army's cavalrymen. Not to mention, some of the recruits had limited strength and didn't have any archery skills. They couldn't shoot from a distance and couldn't be accurate. A wave of arrows flew out and landed a few steps away from the 5-star Army's cavalrymen. Teimu and Lu Duo were stunned when they saw this scene. At first, they thought that the South Ming Army was doing something and that it was some new attack method. But when they saw that the arrows had indeed landed and didn't cause any damage, the two of them finally understood that this was the archery skills of the South Ming Army's recruits. Haha, these recruits probably haven't eaten their fill. Teimu laughed heartily. Commander Lu Duo, who was standing at the side, also smiled. However, his mind was still very clear, and he gave the order to charge ahead of Teimu. F***ck old Lu, you're not being considerate. You attacked first. Brothers of the 1st Division, charge. Teimu panicked when he saw the 2 ND Division's cavalrymen charging out first. He didn't want to lose to Lu Duo. He waved his saber and the 1 ST Division's cavalrymen also started to charge crazily. Another wave of yellow sand filled the sky, giving people the feeling that it covered the sky. Dozens of arrows appeared naturally in an array and were aimed directly at the South Ming Army's front. Hiku's roar sounded again. Release the arrows, release the arrows. Shield bearers in the first row, spearmen in the second row. Defend, defend. Soldiers at the back, get ready to meet the enemy. Meet the enemy. Perhaps it was because he was too excited or too anxious, but Hiku shouted out orders one after another. Then the South Ming Army became a little chaotic. Although they had undergone a short period of training before entering the battlefield, it was just a formality. Everyone knew that soldiers had to be trained and their meals had to be kept up. Without sufficient military funds and food, or perhaps it could be said that all of this was under the supervision of the civil officials who looked down on generals, the new soldiers had never truly undergone any training. Once a general had a request and wanted to train elite soldiers, the civil officials in charge of logistics would stand up and reject the request on the grounds that this wasn't a battlefield and there was no need to be so strict and serious. In the end, they didn't want the soldiers to exhaust too much energy and waste too much food because of training. This was the result of using literature to control military force. In front of these scholars who boasted that they were a cut above others, fighting and killing was something that only boorish people would do. These people's lives were naturally as cheap as dogs and weren't worth investing in. Due to the lack of training, many of the recruits were thrown into chaos on the battlefield. Especially when Hiku's orders were given one after another. Many people didn't even understand what was going on with the first order before the second order was given. This caused a situation of chaos on the battlefield. On the battlefield, a delay of a minute or a second could lead to a missed opportunity and lead to a huge mistake. Facing the attack of the world's #1 cavalry army, the South Ming army actually showed signs of chaos. As the vanguard, how could the 2nd Cavalry Division give up such a good opportunity? They immediately increased their speed and at the same time, they held the Big Dipper crossbow in their hands. This kind of close combat weapon that could fire continuously, other than its range being inferior to a flintlock, was already very powerful. It was because of this that the world's #1 cavalry army was able to win battles with a small number of troops and complete seemingly impossible missions. 200 steps. 150 steps. 100 steps. 80 steps. They were getting closer and closer. The South Ming army's arrows once again flew out and landed in front of the charging warriors of the world's #1 cavalry army. It caused a certain number of casualties, but if one looked carefully it was very effective. Apart from the cavalry's skillful horsemanship, which allowed them to perform various evasive maneuvers to avoid the arrows, the armor on their bodies also played a great role in protecting them. This kind of armor was 3 centimeters thicker than ordinary armor and could block most of the arrows from entering the body. Even if they were hit, as long as it wasn't a critical position, they would only be lightly injured. Especially when they were around 60 steps away, the damage of the arrows seemed to increase. The tips of the arrows that were charging at the front were hit and had no choice but to retreat and rest. However, the damage only stopped there. When the distance was only 50 steps or even closer, the Big Dipper crossbow showed its power. Chapter 1689. This type of crossbow could fire a single shot or 7 shots in a row. Once the distance was right, it would display its unique power. One after another, the crossbows flew forward and fell into the Southern Ming army like steel needles. Cries of pain sounded from all directions. The Big Dipper crossbow could even fire a fan-shaped attack, dealing heavy damage to the enemy. Because they were the first and second rows of Southern Ming archers, they were wearing thin clothes. Only a few of them had leather armor and most of them didn't even have battle armor. Facing the incomparably sharp Big Dipper crossbow, what could they use to block it? It was as if they would directly fall if they were hit by a single arrow. If they were lucky, the soldiers who weren't hit screamed and threw away their bows and began to roll on the ground. Just the 7-star crossbows of the vanguard cavalry had caused a lot of damage, causing the archers of the South Ming army to suffer heavy losses. At the same time, they had cleared a path for them to continue attacking, and at the same time, they had also cut off the threat that the archers of the South Ming army might bring. Under the attack of the 7-star crossbow, the Southern Ming army's third row of shield bearers appeared in front of the cavalry. Although because of the chaos, the shield bearers weren't completely in formation because there were enough people, they gave off a feeling of great momentum. Attack! Chop! The dozens of cavalrymen at the front shouted loudly. Then they pulled out their sharp sabers from their waists. They borrowed the momentum of their horses and used their speed to directly attack the shield bearers in front of them. The sabers used by the world's #1 cavalry army were all specially polished. Whether it was the sharpness or the toughness, they were several times stronger than ordinary swords. Those foreign-race cavalrymen and infantrymen who had fought with them all fearfully called them treasured sabers. When the treasured sabers were unsheathed, they carried killing intent and coldness. When they landed on the shields, the ordinary shields were instantly split in half. The Southern Ming soldiers who should have been hiding behind the shields were thus revealed. The power of the treasured sabers greatly exceeded the expectations of the shield bearers. When they realized that the weapons that could theoretically protect them were useless and their bodies were completely exposed to the enemy cavalry, their desire to live made them turn around and flee. They didn't care that the pikemen behind them had already extended their pikes and were waiting for the cavalry to charge forward. The shield blocked the path and the spear extended. This was one of the common tactics used by infantrymen against cavalry. Especially when the Southern Ming army had the absolute advantage in numbers, this kind of defense and counterattack could often cause a lot of damage to the cavalry. As long as they could stop the enemy's charge and slow down their speed, the advantage of the cavalry would be greatly reduced. Then it would be time for the infantry to counterattack. Unfortunately, all of this was just a theory. When the shields disappeared and the soldiers charged forward, they would directly crash into the spearmen behind them, causing the formation to become chaotic. This so-called theory would not work at all. Before the formation of the pikemen could even come into contact with the enemy cavalry, they were already in chaos, which greatly reduced their power. By the time the cavalry truly charged over, the tip of the pikemen disappeared with a flash of saber light. The pikemen's counterattack was reduced to nothing. More than 100 years later, the scene of the slave construction cavalry charging to kill the great Ming army happened in advance. The difference was that this time, it was the five-star army that was attacking. The difference was that the five-star army's attack was more ferocious than the slave construction cavalry. After the formation of the archers, shield soldiers and pikemen were broken, the defense of the southern Ming army was quickly paralyzed. Countless southern Ming soldiers began to desperately run to the back. At this time they had already forgotten their mission. They only knew that if they rushed back they might have a chance to live. The development of the situation on the battlefield was completely different from what they had imagined. It wasn't that whoever had more people would win. If this was the case, then each country didn't need to go to war. They could just directly develop their population. Although the five-star army only had 20,000 cavalrymen, they were all elite veterans. Even the newly recruited soldiers were the best of the best. They were all people who had seen blood and killed people before. Compared to the southern Ming army, which was full of new recruits, many of them hadn't even killed a chicken before. This was simply incomparable. Once the 7-star crossbows were used, the southern Ming army's formation was disrupted. Then, when the people borrowed the horses' momentum and the sabers' speed to rush into the somewhat chaotic southern Ming army, the slaughter began. Although these were all Han people and would be the cornerstone of the Yangtze's development in the future, in order to obtain a great victory and completely defeat the southern Ming imperial court, they could only endure the pain and kill. This was also in order to preserve more Han people. Blood splattered everywhere. Human lives were like grass. The battlefield had always been cruel. It wasn't a game of life and death. If one had a kind heart, the only one who would die would be himself. When everyone understood this principle, the only thing left was to kill. After the tip of the arrows pierced into the southern Ming army, it was like a large meat grinder. Any southern Ming soldiers who were in front of the five-star army or who dodged a little slower had their heads and limbs separated from their bodies. The smell of blood rushed into the noses of the southern Ming recruits. Ugh! Wag! The southern Ming recruits who had never experienced this kind of battle only felt waves of nausea. Then they had no choice but to squat on the ground and vomit. Especially when the warhorses of the five-star army galloped past and trampled the corpses on the ground like mud. The visual impact made the southern Ming Empire recruits unable to control their bodies. They didn't even have the strength to wield their swords and spears. Other than vomiting, they could only vomit. Everyone stand up. Don't squat down. Don't put down your weapons. Hiku saw the situation develop to this point and roared in anger. Unfortunately, on the chaotic battlefield, under the sound of the horses' hooves, his shout was quickly drowned out and couldn't cause any waves. General, let's retreat. We can't stop them. A soldier came in front of Hiku and said this sentence. Then he directly carried Hiku, who was still cursing, and retreated to the back of the army. This was only a formation of 60,000 people. Behind them, there was still a formation of 60,000 people standing there intact. As long as they regrouped with them, they wouldn't have to worry about not having a chance to counterattack. Hiku retreated, and this scene was discovered by some of the recruits. At that moment, their last bit of will to resist no longer existed. They either fled in all directions or threw down their weapons and knelt on the ground to surrender. The army was defeated like a landslide. Even if there were 60,000 pigs, it would take at least a few days for the 20,000 cavalrymen of the five-star army to capture them. But now, under the iron hooves of the five-star army's cavalrymen, the 60,000 infantrymen couldn't even hold on for an hour and were completely defeated. On the battlefield, the fighting spirit of the southern Ming recruits was rapidly disintegrating. Even Temu and Lu Duo, who were leading the troops, didn't expect this scene. They originally thought that with so many troops, they would still have to hold on for a while. But now it seemed that victory came too suddenly. This was a good thing. Without needing to give orders, the five-star army's cavalrymen chased after Hiku's retreating footsteps. In front of them there were countless southern Ming recruits. These people didn't choose to surrender immediately. Instead, they wanted to escape back to their own camp. Because they chose to escape, their existence was a great threat to the 60,000 people behind them. When they saw the five-star army's cavalrymen coming and saw that there were more of their own comrades in front of the cavalrymen, the commanding general was somewhat helpless. He didn't even dare to give the order to shoot arrows because it was very likely that the arrows wouldn't hit the enemy cavalrymen, but their own infantrymen. Hiku was also running among the defeated troops. When he saw that the 60,000 people behind them didn't choose to shoot arrows, he heaved a sigh of relief. Now that he was among the defeated troops, wouldn't he also lose his life if he released arrows? There was only one thing on his mind right now, and that was to escape to the rear. These 5-star army cavalry were too ferocious, and he would not fight with them in the future. It was better for him to obediently retreat back to Nanchang City and guard it. Hiku, who only cared about escaping, even forgot to let the troops lying in ambush on both sides of the official road attack. Or rather, even if he remembered now, he had no way to inform them. This was a somewhat dramatic defeat, and the development of the battle was beyond everyone's expectations. Reality also proved that the Southern Ming New Army's combat strength could not only be described as ordinary, it could even be described as terrible. 300,000 infantrymen faced the charge of 20,000 cavalrymen. Not to mention the ability to retaliate, they couldn't even put up a basic resistance. No one would have any confidence that such an army could protect the Southern Ming Imperial Court. Taimu, and General Lu Duo were still leading the charge. They charged again, and in front of them were the defeated Southern Ming soldiers that were continuously retreating. Among them were the 60,000 people behind them. After seeing that the front line had already been defeated and fleeing, and seeing the bravery of the 5-star army's cavalrymen, as well as the heads that would fly on the battlefield from time to time, the 60,000 Southern Ming recruits who were guarding the rear also began to flee. Some of them, in order to escape faster, directly threw their weapons to the ground and continued to run, fiercely charging toward Nanchang that was 60 li behind them. Wherever the 5-star army's cavalrymen passed, there were either corpses covered in blood, captives kneeling on the ground, or Southern Ming recruits fleeing in all directions. There was no resistance at all, and this made the two division commanders even more ambitious. Nanchang. Taimu and Lu Duo said at almost the same time. Then there was a burst of laughter. The 20,000 cavalrymen who didn't suffer too many casualties, gave up on their pursuers and headed straight for Nanchang that was 60 li away. Chapter 1690. Instead of capturing captives everywhere, it would be better to directly attack the Nanchang prefecture. As long as they occupied the place, these deserters would become turtles in a jar and would not be able to escape. Of course, when they were attacking, they did not forget to send a telegram to Tianhu, who was behind them. They gave a simple summary of their thoughts and the situation on the battlefield. When the telegram was sent to Tianhu, he was leading the army towards Lijiapa. They were not moving at their fastest speed. Tianhu's idea was to let the two cavalry divisions consume the enemy's strength. When the enemy was exhausted, he would suddenly appear with the main force and win. He never thought that the battle would go so smoothly. Tianhu could only give up his previous plan and said to the telegram operator, "Immediately send a telegram to the 3rd, 4th, and 5th divisions. Tell them to quickly go to the battlefield and capture the captives. Order the army to speed up. Tell everyone that if they are late, they will not be able to drink the soup. Lastly, send a telegram to the 3rd division. Tell them to speed up and take care of the captives." Telegrams were sent out one after another. At this time, if one could look down from the sky, they would see that with Lijiapa as the center, there were several cavalry units moving quickly and surrounding him. Behind the cavalry, there was also the 5th division of the Lu Lingfeng division. Although they were the last to set out, they were quickly approaching the battlefield with their 3-wheeled motorcycles. Their vanguard had even caught up with the 3rd division. Nanchang Prefecture. The sky was getting dark. There were scattered soldiers standing guard on the city walls. But from their relaxed expressions, they did not realize that the battle was about to begin. There was less than half an hour before the city gates closed. The soldiers on the city walls began to gather in 2s and 3s to chat. From time to time they would even laugh. They were so relaxed because they were very optimistic about the situation on the front line. After all, the 300,000 infantrymen were already prepared. They were only facing the 100,000 5-star army from afar. They should have a high chance of winning. Even if they could not win in a short time, they could still be in a stalemate. As for the Nanchang Prefecture, it could be said that it was safe. Since that was the case, why was there a need to be so nervous? Not only the soldiers, but even Li Qingzhua, the political envoy of the city, was also holding a banquet for the tyrants in the city. Once the war started, they would need a lot of money and food. There was only one reason why they had gathered these people, and that was to ask them to donate money and get food. Li Qing was very confident in doing this. After all, Yang Xie's policies had already spread throughout the southern Ming dynasty. Those who surrendered could take 20% of their family's wealth and move out. Those who didn't surrender and did evil would be killed and their property confiscated. Those who didn't surrender and didn't do evil would be captured and released. They could only take 10% of their family's wealth and move out. This kind of policy was unacceptable to all magnates. Why should they hand over the wealth and land that they had worked so hard to create for several generations? With such a sharp contradiction, there was only one way to resolve it, and that was to fight. It would be best if they could defeat the five-star army. At the very least, they had to keep them out of the city. That way they could continue to live above others. For the sake of their better days, they could only donate some money and food. Although they felt some heartache, they could only do as they were told. When Li Qing's invitation was sent to the tyrants, they all thought about it and came. For a moment, the Li residence was very lively, and it didn't feel like a war was about to break out. At this moment outside the city, Taimu and Lu Duo finally arrived with the cavalry before the city gates were closed. Then they ignored their fatigue and directly attacked Nanchang City. When a large number of cavalry arrived, the southern Ming soldiers guarding the city gate were still confused about what was going on. When they felt the ground beneath their feet tremble, they looked in front of them in shock. When someone with sharp eyes saw that it was a cavalry with a bright red five-star army flag, he couldn't help but shout, "It's the five-star army's cavalry. Quick, quick, close the city gates." At this moment, it was too late to close the city gates. The five-star army's cavalry at the front had already drawn their bows and arrows. After a series of shio 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 sounds pierced through the air, the southern Ming soldiers who were rushing towards the city gate were shot down to the ground. This frightened the other southern Ming soldiers. These new recruits who had never been on the battlefield and had never seen blood before did not continue to take the risk to close the city gates. They didn't even have the courage to go into the city to report. Instead, they tactfully knelt on the ground, threw down their weapons and made a gesture of surrender. They were able to do this mostly because the five-star army's appearance was too sudden and ruthless. After all, no one wanted to die, so no one would take the risk. Another reason was that to the commoners, it was the same no matter who ruled over them. The southern Ming dynasty did not treat them well. Especially in the past few years, the taxes had been constantly increasing. Some commoners could no longer live, and there were even some who directly left their homeland for the Yangtze's territory. It was said that the Han people there were treated very well. Not only were they able to eat their fill and wear warm clothes, but they were also given a lot of farmland and lived a better life. Those who stayed were not necessarily loyal to the southern Ming dynasty. They just didn't want to leave because of various reasons. Now that the five-star army's cavalry was in front of them, why would they risk their lives for the southern Ming dynasty? They might as well just surrender. In any case, they had no money, no power, and no farmland. Apart from their lives, they had nothing. Could the cavalry kill them? This was the true portrayal of the commoner's mentality under the feudal dynasty. Between the rise and fall of the dynasty, the commoners were usually the most indifferent. They didn't have high demands and only wanted to survive. Apart from a few rotten dynasties, most of them were very tolerant of the commoners. Therefore, the change of dynasty was always a struggle between the upper echelons. There were very few commoners who participated in it. Even if there were people who participated, there were only a few people. It was just like when the Japanese invaded China. The commoners also held such thoughts. This was why they were ruled for 8 years and even longer in some areas. If the commoners could all stand up and resist, then they would all be able to wash the Japanese into the sea and feed them to the sharks. Temujin and Lu Duo smoothly entered the city. Then, several Yangtze secret agents came out from the city gates. They took out items that could prove their identity and gain the trust of the cavalry. Then they immediately rushed to the most important places in Nanchang City. Poor Li Qing was still receiving the guests in the mansion when suddenly, a servant came to report that the five-star army had entered the city. Li Qing, who had drunk a little too much, didn't hear it clearly. He thought that there was something wrong with his ears. He actually laughed and said, "Did this official hear wrongly? What did you just say? The five-star army was defeated?" Seeing that Li Qing was still not sober, the soldier who came to report couldn't help but raise his voice and shouted, "Sir, it wasn't that the five-star army was defeated. They entered the city and have already surrounded our Li mansion." The voice was so loud that this time, Li Qing heard it clearly. Because of this, he froze in place and looked at the soldier who came to report with an incredulous expression. He wanted to know what was going on. Was it the servant's nonsense, or did the five-star army really enter the city? There was no need to verify. There were already sounds of fighting outside the mansion. It was the mansion soldiers fighting with the 5-star army cavalry. Unfortunately, the battle only lasted for a short period of time before a large number of footsteps could be heard heading towards the residence. Not good, it must be the 5-star army. Quickly run. When the other nobles saw that the situation was bad, they quickly stood up and wanted to rush to the door. Then, countless sabers were erected in front of them, forcing them to retreat. A burly man with the insignia of a major general walked into the hall with a smile. Who else could it be but Timur? When he saw so many people in bright clothes gathered here, he couldn't help but laugh and say, "Not bad, everyone should be here. Since that's the case, capture them all. Kill anyone who resists." In the face of the ferocious Timur, everyone stopped resisting. They could feel the killing intent coming from this general and his soldiers. They believed that if they really dared to resist, they would be the next to die. More than 2 hours before the fall of Nanchang City, Tian, who also brought his army to Lijiapa and attacked the 200,000 new South Ming soldiers who were still lying in ambush here, waiting for orders. When the ambushers became the target of the ambush, the morale of the South Ming soldiers quickly collapsed. When the Lung Feng 5th Division and Meng Sanshi arrived, they began to capture the captives. In this battle, more than 12,000 of the 300,000 South Ming soldiers died. Most of them were trampled to death. Tens of thousands were injured and more than 200,000 were captured. Even the general He Ku was captured at night. In the end, less than 20,000 people escaped. Even these 20,000 people didn't report to the other South Ming government offices. It was obvious that they were scared by the 5-star army. They changed from soldiers back to commoners. On the day of Nanchang Prefecture's complete victory, gunshots rang out in Jiangxia Prefecture, and the sounds of killing shook the heavens. It was completely different from Guangzhou City and Nanchang City. The 5-star army chose to storm the city and kill their way in. Huguang City was also known as the Hubei Administrative Bureau, Jiangxia City, Wuchang City, Wuhan City. It had Wuchang City, Hanyang City, Huangzhou City, Qingtian City, Dan City, Jingzhou City, Xiangyang City, Yinyang City, etc. Lu Jianli, the Administrative Bureau of the Left, gathered all the soldiers and civilians of Hubei City and Jiangxia City. There were a total of 100,000 soldiers. Then they welcomed the 150,000 reinforcements sent by the imperial court. With Mu Tsong as the leader, they decided to defend Jiangxia City to the death. Chapter 1691. The eldest son of the former king of Shiping was chased into the mountains by the 5-star army. He survived by eating rats and ants and escaped to Yingtian Prefecture. Because he had experience fighting against the 5-star army and was the eldest son of the former king of Shiping, there was no problem with his loyalty. He was sent by Zhu Qixin to guard Jiangxia. Mu Tsong didn't look happy at all as he held the 150,000 new imperial soldiers. He knew how powerful the 5-star army was, so he discussed with Sir Lu Jianli to defend the city to the death. Mu Tsong said that they didn't have as many soldiers as the Nanchang Prefecture and Guangzhou Prefecture. They were also new soldiers. If they went out to fight, it would be suicide. It was better to use all of their strength to defend the city. They could hold on for a while longer and even turn the tide. Lu Jianli agreed with the suggestion to defend the city to the death. Jiangxia Prefecture immediately started to strengthen the city. All kinds of defensive weapons were also prepared. However, it was useless. When the 5-star army arrived at the city, 100mm caliber field cannons were set up. All of the preparations were in vain. New Army Commander Su He, Lung Feng 4th Division Commander Ling Daqiang, and Meng 2nd Division Commander he discussed and decided to attack Jiangxia City. This is the first time the motorcycles are on the battlefield. It's a good opportunity to train the troops. Commander Ling Daqiang seemed to be very proud of this method and laughed. Su He and he didn't need to be mentioned. They both liked to be straightforward. Attacking by force was exactly what they wanted. The field cannons were set up and then the shells were fired. In just half an hour, a hole over 100 meters wide was blasted open on the city walls of Jiangxia Prefecture. Then the cavalry and motorcycles poured in through the hole. This was especially true for the 3-wheeled motorcycle. There was a heavy machine gun mounted on it, and the soldier in the back was holding a light machine gun. With their cooperation, any southern Ming recruit that entered their sight became a moving target. Bursts of gunshots rang out, and the southern Ming soldiers fell to the ground one after another. Needless to say, the cavalry relied on the momentum of their horses and brandished their sabers. One by one, heads fell to the ground and bodies fell to the ground. When the motorcycles and cavalry charged into the city and dealt a heavy blow to the new southern Ming army, Mu Tsong showed his brave side. He personally led the newly formed inspection team and commanded batch after batch of South Ming New Army to launch a suicidal charge against the Five-Star Army. When corpses littered the ground and blood flowed like a river, it finally incited a mutiny among the recruits. They turned their spearhead and charged at Mu Tsong and his inspection team. It was a pity that the eldest son of the king of Shiping did not die in the hands of the Five-Star Army. Instead, he died in the chaos after being slashed countless times. Mu Tsong died in battle and Lu Jianli surrendered. Hubei was settled in one battle and they captured more than 230,000 recruits. One was a smart move, the other was a forceful attack, but the results were both good. When Yang Qindong received the telegrams from Tianhu and Su He, he was naturally pleased. When he issued the commendation, he ordered them to continue to work hard and continue to attack the Southern Ming Empire. He wanted the Southern Ming Empire to be unable to mobilize their troops in time to occupy more territory before the Southern Ming Empire reacted. At the same time, Yang Qindong ordered Yu Mian to take over the territories in Jiangxi and Hubei. At the same time, he arranged for the accompanying officials to take up their posts. Since those places were already Yang Xie's territory, they had to be properly protected. As for what to do, the officials who came along were all experienced and knew what to do. After arranging all these, Yang Qindong looked at the Guangzhou prefecture in front of him and felt that it was a bit of an eyesore. Before he could think of a solution, the 3rd Army's commander Wu Sheng and 2nd Army's commander Xiao Feng came to him and requested to attack the city. Obviously, they were stimulated by the victory of their brothers. Yang Qindong was naturally gratified by the general's overflowing fighting spirit. He also felt that it was about time. They had already surrounded and bombarded the city for 5 days. It was time to give them a result. From tomorrow onwards, increase the intensity of the bombardment. Also, get the Air Force to distribute leaflets. Tell them that they only have 1 day. If they don't surrender, they will burn the Guangzhou prefecture. The next morning, the weather was fine. After the first round of bombardment, several hot air balloons appeared in the sky above the Guangzhou prefecture. Following that, countless leaflets of various colors fell from the sky and scattered around the city. After the first round of bombardment, there were many more injured people in the Guangzhou prefecture. Compared to the previous 2 days, the bombardment was even more ferocious. The Southern Ming soldiers and civilians in the city clearly understood what it meant to be in an abyss of suffering. Guan Ying hid in a basement dug by a tyrant in the city with a solemn expression. The bombardment outside was so intense that he didn't dare to stay outside any longer. Other than leaving a few soldiers on the city wall to observe the movements of the Five-Star Army, he usually stayed here. Guan Ying had thought of countless outcomes. He even thought of the Five-Star Army attacking the city. If the city was breached, he would die on the battlefield. However, he didn't think that the Five-Star Army would besiege the city and use cannons to deal with him. Now that the 450,000 soldiers were trapped in the city and couldn't leave, they didn't have an opponent to fight against. This feeling made him feel helpless. Dang dang dang. Someone knocked on the door. Before Guan Ying could invite him in, the Guangdong Provincial Secretary Yang Xian walked in with a leaflet in his hand. He was sweating profusely. General Guan, look at this. It's all over the city. The situation isn't good. Guan Ying reached out to take the leaflet. After reading the first few lines, Guan Ying flew into a rage. This is impossible. The Nanchang Prefecture and Jiangxia Prefecture have a total of 550,000 soldiers. How could they be breached in such a short time? This must be a rumor spread by the Five-Star Army to attack our morale. Yang Xian didn't answer this question. He didn't know how to answer it. Logically speaking, this was impossible. However, after seeing the power of the Five-Star Army's cannons, he had to admit that the Five-Star Army could do what the Southern Ming Army couldn't. Just like the Guangzhou Prefecture under his feet. Was it because the Five-Star Army couldn't take it down? Of course not. They just wanted to capture him. However, looking at the contents of the leaflet, if they didn't surrender, the cannons would be even fiercer. They might even set the city on fire. It was obvious that the Five-Star Army was angry. They would rather give up the Guangzhou Prefecture to deal with them. If they really wanted to burn the city, they wouldn't have anywhere to hide. Yang Xian hurriedly came to find Guan Ying, hoping to discuss a solution. After reading the leaflet seriously, Guan Ying turned around and asked Yang Xian, Sir Yang, do you think that Nanchang and Jiangxia prefectures have really been breached? What does it matter if they are breached or not? The important thing is that we don't have time. The five-star army had already made the final announcement through the leaflet. Either we rush out and fight the five-star army, or we abandon the city and escape. Otherwise we can just stay in the city and wait to be burned to death. Yang Xian reminded Guanyin. At this moment, Guanyin didn't care about whether Nanchang and Jiangxia prefectures had been breached or not by the five-star army. Yang Xian was right. The difficulty in front of them was the most important. Didn't the five-star army say that they will take in the wounded? Send our wounded out of the city and we will break out. I believe that the emperor won't blame us. If there is a crime, I will bear it. Guanyin finally thought it through. He wanted to send the wounded out and reduce the burden on the army before breaking out. He had a feeling that the five-star army was playing the trick of surrounding 3 and missing 1. However, he didn't have a choice now, right? Once the hundreds of thousands of soldiers rushed out of the city, there would be many who would escape. This could be considered as leaving some seeds for the southern Ming army. After finally making a decision, Yang Xian let out a sigh of relief after hearing Guanying's decision. He was afraid that Guanyin would still be indifferent. If that was the case, then the problem would be serious. He was afraid that the wounded soldiers wouldn't be comforted and a mutiny might occur. If that was the case, then there was no need for the five-star army to make a move. The hundreds of thousands of soldiers would kill themselves. Yang Xian let out a sigh of relief and seemed to be afraid that Guanyin would go back on his words. He hurriedly said, "Okay, I will arrange for the wounded soldiers to be sent out of the city. I hope that the five-star army will keep their promise and treat them." Yang Xian's shout could be heard from the top of the Guangzhou city's city wall. He expressed that he was willing to hand over the wounded soldiers to the five-star army and hoped that they would be treated well. Soon after, the western city gate opened and some southern Ming soldiers carried or supported the 20,000 wounded soldiers out of the city. Then, the soldiers in charge of escorting the wounded soldiers hurriedly returned to the city and closed the city gate from the inside. The five-star army continued to watch and didn't take the opportunity to attack. It wasn't until the gates of the Guangzhou city were closed that some soldiers rushed forward and brought the wounded soldiers back. The medical personnel who had been waiting for a few days also came forward and began to classify the wounded soldiers and treat them. "They're quite cooperative." Commander Wu Xing chuckled. Yang Qindong's expression didn't change. Everything was within his expectations because he knew that the enemy was going to break out. "It seems that we don't need to burn down the Guangzhou city." "Sixth young master, do you mean that they are going to break out?" Wu Sheng was worthy of his position as a commander and quickly thought of something. On the other side, Commander Xiaofeng also understood Yang Qindong's meaning and added, "The reason why they sent the wounded soldiers out is because they don't want to be implicated when they break out." "That's right, you are all right." "All right, Commander Wu, you have things to do. Go and inform Commander Ahuli and prepare to make a move. If I'm not wrong, they will break out tonight." Yang Qindong nodded calmly. The battle of the Guangzhou city should be over soon. Just as Yang Qindong expected, after the wounded soldiers were sent away, Guanyin made preparations to break out. Chapter 1692. He called Yang Xian, Li Hani and the others over to discuss how to break out of the encirclement. In the end, Li Hani would be the vanguard, leading 50,000 soldiers to clear the way. Yang Xian and the other civil officials would be protected in the middle, and Guanyin would lead the main army to follow. If the five-star army caught up, he would lead the army to meet them. He would risk his life to buy enough time for everyone to break out of the encirclement. Yang Xian and Li Hani disagreed when they heard that Guanyin wanted to bring the army to bring up the rear. "All right, it's settled. With Bugnam of Gojoseon's personality, he won't give up until he catches me. Since I can't escape no matter what, I might as well stay behind. I only hope that if you see the emperor, you must tell him that I, Guanyin, didn't defect and fought until the last moment." Since Guanyin had already said so, what else could they say? They could only nod and agree. Next they started to cook and let the soldiers eat their fill. No one knew how long they would run and where they would have their next meal. The cannons in the city continued to fire. This was Yang Qindong's idea. He didn't want Guanyin to think too much when the cannons stopped firing. As long as the other party left the turtle shell that was the Guangzhou government, he wouldn't have the final say in what happened next. After another afternoon of cannons, the southern Ming army lost another 1,000 soldiers and 2,000 more injured soldiers. Guanyin kept all the injured soldiers and told them that the five-star army wouldn't make things difficult for them. Then everyone sat down and waited for the sky to turn dark. In order to prevent the five-star army from discovering their plan, Guanyin didn't order to burn the accumulated rations in the city. What he wanted to do was to leave the city without anyone knowing. As long as they could catch the 5-star army off guard, even if they wanted to chase after them, they wouldn't be able to do anything to them. It was also impossible to catch all of them. Amidst their anticipation, the sky finally turned dark. After another round of cannons bombarding. Outside the city, the sound of the 5-star army's metal horns could be heard. They urged them to surrender and also asked them to send the injured soldiers out. They promised that they would treat them well. Alright, now is the time. The army will leave the city. Guan Ying immediately made a decision. He was already clear about the 5-star army's pattern of cannons. Usually, the sound would continue for an hour before another round of cannons were fired. He wanted to use this time to let more people rush out of the city. The east gate opened from the inside was creaking in the night. Then, countless black shadows rushed out of the city and headed straight towards the southern Ming's heartland. 300 paces away from them, the army were the army and were the 5-star armies too. Seeing that the enemy had indeed begun to break through the encirclement, the squad leader in the middle said, "Immediately report the situation here. Sheep is out of the encirclement." Yes, in front of the powerful 5-star army, the South Ming army was just a bunch of sheep. Even if Guan Ying's army was made up of veterans, they did not put them in their eyes. Their weapons were not as good as theirs, their morale was not as good as theirs, their protection was not as good as theirs, and their treatment was not as good as theirs. At this time the soldiers did not have a strong will. They did not even know who they were fighting for. In their muddle-headedness, they only thought about how to survive on the battlefield. It would be too difficult to rely on such an army to win the war. The mighty army walked out of the Guang province prefecture in the dark. In order not to be discovered, they did not even light up their torches. As a result, there were sounds of people falling or spraining their ankles on the road. Even Li Hani's vanguard army was like this. This army was a veteran army based on the Guang High Guards. They could be called veterans, but they had only been in the army for a long time and did not have much actual combat experience. The 5-star army was to blame for this. Because of their strength, they had wiped out all the nearby forces. Now the South Ming army had nothing to worry about. They did not even have a ship, so it was impossible for them to participate in actual combat. Therefore, even though they had been in the army for many years, it was still the first time for many of them to be on the battlefield. When they saw how cruel the war was and how many of their comrades were killed in the artillery fire before they even saw the appearance of the 5-star corps, they finally understood how powerful the opponent they were facing this time was. They also knew that this battle was much more difficult than they had imagined. However, they were already on the battlefield, so there was no point in thinking about it. What they needed to do now was to leave the Guang province prefecture and reach a safe place. As for what to do next, many of them had their own thoughts, which was to escape. There were even many people who had such thoughts. As the Guang High Guards who lived near the coastal area, they knew more than ordinary South Ming people. From time to time, they would see Yangxia's merchant ships and warships floating in front of them, which indicated their economic prosperity and military strength. There was also the policy of Yangxia towards the Han people, which made them understand that if they could join Yangxia, their life and work would be much better than in the South Ming dynasty. The pride in their hearts was dissipating bit by bit, and it was replaced by envy. However, because they were the registered soldiers of the Guang High Guards, they did not dare to do anything. If they really defected to Yangxia, it would only bring disaster to their families and loved ones. However, it was different in the war. They could face casualties at any time, so if there was a chance they would secretly leave. This way the South Ming dynasty would not immediately deal with their families. While the other party was investigating, they could find a way to bring their families to Yangxia's territory. Everyone had a selfish side, but some people showed it more obviously. Now, for the safety and a better life for themselves and their families, many soldiers had already made a decision in their hearts. As their commander, Li Hani was naturally able to sense all of this. However, he pretended not to see it and did not think too much about it. Thinking about it, if even ordinary soldiers could see it, how could he, as the commander, not understand it? It was just that he was indebted to the emperor and could not do something like surrendering without a fight. He could not do it, but he could give his brothers a way out. What the eye does not see, the heart does not grieve over. With such a mentality, he led the Guang High Guards as the main force of the South Ming dynasty's army as the vanguard and walked at the front of the group. Their speed of progress was quite good. When it was almost dawn, they had already rushed 15 kilometers and left Guangzhou behind. Li Hani believed that he was safe. He did not see any soldiers from the 5-star army for the entire night, so he believed that escaping would not be a problem. Now he was worried that General Guanyin, who was in charge of covering the rear, would not be able to escape. After all, with so many soldiers leaving Guangzhou, there was no reason why the five-star army would not be able to detect them. In fact, their every move was under the surveillance of the five-star army. The reason why they did not make a move was because they were waiting for the South Ming Dynasty's army to leave the city. Otherwise, once they attacked, what would they do if they scared the enemy back into the city? Since this battle had lasted the longest, it was only natural that they hoped to reap the most rewards. If they still had to attack the city in the end, they might as well choose to attack the city like how the new army in the Cold Vanguard Division dealt with the Jiangxia Prefecture. Although the losses would be greater and the gains would be less, victory would be in their hands. Waiting was often the most torturous thing. Seeing that the sky was about to brighten and the vanguard of the South Ming Dynasty's army was about to run out of the encirclement, news finally came from the radio. The last batch of South Ming Dynasty's army had also walked out of Guangzhou and was about 2 kilometers away from the city. In the current Guangzhou prefecture, other than injured soldiers and some old people who could not walk, there were no decent soldiers left. Yang Qindong also immediately saw the telegram sent by Wang Shan and immediately said, "Order the entire army to attack. Follow the plan and encircle the South Ming Dynasty's army. Those who surrender will live, those who resist will die." The 18-kilometer encirclement was only guarded by the 50,000 soldiers of the Third Army and the 50,000 soldiers of the Russian First Division. It was clearly a bit empty. Luckily, the Cold Vanguard Division was mobilized in time. With their powerful firepower, they were able to fill the gap in the encirclement. Every 30 meters, there was a machine gun set up on both sides of the road to block the escape route of the South Ming Dynasty's army. It was a bit risky, but when he thought of the fighting spirit of the South Ming Dynasty's army and the machine gun, Yang Qindong felt relieved. However, in order to ensure that there would not be any problems, he looked at Crown Prince Yang Bo and said, "Bo, do you want to go to the battlefield?" "Yes." Almost without any hesitation, Yang Bo excitedly and quickly replied. As he spoke, he even put his feet together like a soldier who received an order to stand at attention. Yang Qindong was very satisfied with Yang Bo's performance. "Good, since that is the case, I will give you a chance. You can take the 4,000 black cavalry soldiers to the battlefield. But remember, you are only responsible for the periphery. Wherever there is a gap, block it. There is no need for you on the main battlefield. Also, these are all Han people. If you can avoid killing them, don't kill them." Although it was only a peripheral mission, Yang Bo was still very excited. He originally thought that he was only here to feel the atmosphere on the battlefield. He did not expect that he would have a chance to personally go to the battlefield. How could Yang Bo not agree? He immediately saluted and replied, "I promise to complete the mission." Yang Bo left. Along with him were Beta Persei Black Cavalry 1st Brigade Captain Qiu Vi, 2nd Brigade Captain Dao Xiao, Vice Brigade Captain Peng Yu and the others. Only Ba Daojiang and the 1,000 black cavalry soldiers stayed by Yang Qindong's side. Chapter 1693. From this, it could be seen that Yang Qindong admired Ba Daojiang a lot. Once Qiu Vi and Dao Xiao retired due to age, this person would become the true leader of the Black Cavalry. Right after the Black Cavalry Dragon Guard set off with Crown Prince Chang Yang Bo, the 3rd Army of the Lengfeng Army and the 2nd Division of the Lengfeng Army also launched an attack on the official road to the east of the Guangzhou Prefecture. They tightened the encirclement and launched an encirclement to annihilate the 400,000-strong Southern Ming Army. Guanyin was in charge of bringing up the rear. When he led the 50,000 soldiers out of the Guangzhou Prefecture, the sound of horse hooves and gunshots could be heard from all directions. At this time, the sky was already bright and one could vaguely see that the front of the army was already in chaos. There was also the sound of horse hooves covering the sky. "Not good, we've fallen into a trap." Guanyin was indeed Kuang Ye's student and immediately thought of a possibility. The first order he gave was for the army to turn back and return to the Guangzhou Prefecture. At least they could rely on the city walls to resist. Even if they retreated back into the city, they could still fight in the streets. It was not like the outside of the city where everything was flat. What could they defend? Guanyin gave the order very quickly. However, someone was even faster than them. The 4th Regiment commander of the 2nd Division of the Lung Feng Corps Ling Lianquan was in charge of bringing up the rear. After the Southern Ming Army left the city, he brought a whole battalion of Lung Feng soldiers to the front of the Guangzhou Prefecture's east gate and quickly set up a defensive line. Countless prepared sandbags were piled up together to form a temporary defensive line. Before the defensive line was fully set up, the southern Ming army that had just left charged back. Regiment Commander Ling Lianquan, who could already see the people approaching, took out a loudspeaker and shouted, "This road is blocked. The Guangzhou prefecture is now under the control of the 5-star army. Anyone who dares to come within 100 meters of the front will be treated as a dangerous person and will be killed on the spot. Lay down your weapons and that is your only way out. The 5-star army can guarantee your safety and dignity." Ling Lianquan was not the only one shouting. Every platoon had a soldier shouting the same slogan to ensure that every southern Ming soldier could hear them clearly. The shouts did enter the ears of the southern Ming soldiers. But at this moment no one cared so much. They only knew that the 5-star army only had a few hundred people. This was a great opportunity for them to attack. If they did not seize this opportunity, they would not be able to return to the Guangzhou prefecture, which would be the real danger. Countless soldiers from the southern Ming dynasty rushed over. They wanted to rely on their advantage in numbers to completely defeat the 5-star army. However, just as they ignored the advice and entered about 100 steps away from the formation, gunshots rang out. In view of the large number of soldiers from the southern Ming army, there were at least 5,000 soldiers in the vanguard. Commander Ling Lianquan did not dare to be careless. When he gave the order to counterattack, he used heavy firepower. Light and heavy machine guns and rocket launchers rained down on the southern Ming army, causing flames to erupt. Countless southern Ming soldiers fell to the ground, covered in blood. This was a battle that should not be taken seriously. It couldn't even be called a battle. It would be more accurate to call it a massacre. The moment the gunshots rang out, the 5,000 soldiers from the southern Ming dynasty were destined to die. A group of soldiers holding large swords and spears rushed towards a group of soldiers with modern weapons. It was like a suicide attack against the 8-nation alliance in the late Qing dynasty. Figures fell to the ground one after another, and their lives were quickly drained away. After nearly a quarter of an hour, the barrels of many of the cold vanguard warriors had turned red. The ground was littered with bullet casings. Finally, there were no more enemies in front of them. The world suddenly became quiet. There were more than 5,000 lives, but in just a short 15 minutes, not a single one had survived. This kind of lethality was something that the southern Ming soldiers had never seen before. Even Guanyin, who was leading the troops, couldn't help but widen his eyes and shut his mouth when he saw this scene, even though he was already mentally prepared. He knew that it was over. Everything was over. The 5-star army had such a powerful firepower advantage. It was not something that the southern Ming dynasty could contend against. Not to mention that their military strength was only 3 times that of the enemy. Even if it was 10 times, 100 times, or 1,000 times, they still could not see any hope of victory. Guanyin finally understood why the 5-star army was able to conquer such a large territory in just a few decades. They were able to conquer a situation that the Han people did not even dare to think about. If the southern Ming dynasty had such powerful firearms, they should also be able to do it. Guanyin could not help but feel a burst of joy in his heart. The 5-star army was ultimately the Han people's army. They would not be as ruthless as they were against other races. Didn't they just shout for them to surrender so that they could keep their lives and dignity? It would not be too difficult for the surrendered soldiers to keep their lives. However, it would not be easy for them to keep their dignity. Since the 5-star army made such a promise, it meant that they still treated the southern Ming dynasty as a part of the Han people. Thus, surrendering was not unacceptable. Just as Guanyin was thinking about this, a captain ran in front of him and asked carefully, "General, should we continue to charge?" Guanyin could see from the eyes of this chilly arch that he was afraid. However, he did not have any intention of mocking him. If it was him, wouldn't he also be afraid? It was just that he was not afraid of death. He was only afraid of unnecessary casualties. What's the point of continuing to fight? We can't win. Just follow their words and surrender. Also, go to the front and tell the army to surrender. Guanyin finally made the best decision in his life. That was to surrender to the 5-star army and save everyone's lives. As for how the history books would write about him, he would just let it be. Guanyin surrendered. This result was beyond the expectations of many people. Even Yang Qindong, who was at the rear, was slightly surprised when he received the news. In his opinion, Guanyin should be an extremely strong die-hard person who would rather die in battle than surrender. However, no one would have thought that after a series of gunshots and a one-sided massacre, they would actually convince him. It seemed that sometimes one had to be decisive. Although this seemed a little cruel, it was often possible to use the smallest price to obtain the greatest victory. Just as Guan Ying announced his surrender, the 18-kilometer battle line was already in chaos. The sudden appearance of the five-star army's cold vanguard soldiers and cavalry caught the southern Ming dynasty's army off guard. They first carried out a meaningless resistance without any suspense. After throwing down some corpses, the morale of the army collapsed. They did not choose to fight force with force. Instead, they began to run in all directions. At this time, the five-star army soldiers who were already in position played a role. They used guns and heavy machinery to block most of the escape routes of the southern Ming dynasty's army, forcing most of the southern Ming dynasty's army back to the battlefield. However, there were also a small number of people who escaped from the gap in the encirclement. But then, they were divided into squads and surrounded by the seemingly omnipresent black cavalry and became one of the captives. Yang Bo and Beta Persei led a group of 8 Longwei soldiers. They also successfully surrounded a group of hundreds of southern Ming dynasty soldiers. In order to escape faster, they had already thrown away all their weapons and became unarmed deserters. How could they be a match for the elite black cavalry dragon guards? It was also Yang Bo's first time participating in a real battle. Although he was only responsible for the periphery and faced some defeated soldiers who had lost their fighting spirit, he was still very excited. Wearing a set of specially tailored black battle armor, he single-handedly stopped 7 southern Ming soldiers who were trying to escape. Yang Bo did not know that this was the result of Beta Persei deliberately going easy on him. His every move was in the sight of Beta Persei. Once there was danger, he would rush to his side to protect him. In the worst-case scenario, he would become a huge human shield. Whether he knew it or not, whether it was intentional or not, Yang Bo had indeed been trained. He also showed maturity and steadiness beyond his age from the first battle. After that, when Beta Persei reported to Yang Qindong, he was not stingy with his praise. This also proved that Yang Qindong's way of training his successor was correct. Yang Bo's growth also made Yang Qindong very pleased. There was nothing happier than having a successor. The Guangzhou prefecture was breached. This battle lasted for a full 6 days. Nearly 10,000 enemies were killed, more than 30,000 were injured, and more than 400,000 were captured alive. As soon as the news reached Nanjing Yingtian Prefecture, the precious porcelain in front of Zhu Qizhen was smashed clean. Just a few days ago he received a letter from Guan Ying asking for help and was thinking about whether to send reinforcements. Then came the news that Jiangxia and Nanchang prefectures were breached, Jiangxi and Huguang were occupied by the five-star army, and hundreds of thousands of soldiers were captured. On the day he received the letter, Zhu Qizhen smashed a lot of things. But at that time he still had hope in his heart, and that was Guan Ying. Unlike Nanchang Prefecture and Jiangxia Prefecture, they were all new soldiers. In contrast, Guan Ying brought some veterans. Although they had not seen blood, they had been trained for so long, so they should have some strength. Just as he was thinking about whether there would be good news from the Guangzhou Prefecture that could at least inflict a heavy blow on the five-star army and let everyone know that Yang Xie was not invincible, the Guangzhou Prefecture fell. Guan Ying surrendered, along with more than 400,000 soldiers. In this way, including the local army, there were less than 1 million soldiers a few days ago. Now, there were only 700,000 soldiers in his hands, including the soldiers of the capital defense camp. Could they still resist the advance of Yang Xie's army? Chapter 1694. Peace Talks. After Zhu Qizhen calmed down, this thought flashed through his mind. Since there was no way he could win in a fight, it was better to negotiate while he still had some strength. It was better than the other party killing his way to Jingdo to negotiate. At this time, Zhu Qizhen was still dreaming of being the emperor. In his opinion, losing a few provinces was nothing. After his efforts, didn't he already lose half of the great Ming dynasty? Although it was called Baiming, he had long regarded it as a different race. Now he was only losing half of his territory, so why not? As long as he was still the emperor, he would be able to make a comeback, wouldn't he? As long as there was hope, he would fight for it. Mao Mu and Zhou Xiang met Zhu Qizhen under such circumstances. Because Minister Xie Chongshu had once met with Yang Qindong alone in Crimson City, and as for what they talked about, no one knew. He had long since lost Zhu Qizhen's trust. Right now, he was locked up in the prison of the Brocade Guard's Brocade Guard. Now, Zhou Xiang was in charge of the Ministry of Rights. However, his loyalty was still to be determined, so he did not take the position of minister. In front of the two of them, Zhu Qizhen tentatively expressed his thoughts. In the end he said, I am considering the safety of the people and don't want them to suffer the pain of war, so I made this decision. And if Bugnam of Gojoseon must come to the capital, I will fight to the death with him. Obviously Zhu Qizhan still cared about his face. At the end he still hardened himself and expressed that he was an unyielding person. In fact, in history Zhu Qizhan still had some ability. Even when he was captured by the leader of the Wara, he was very decent and unyielding. Of course, that was only recorded in the history books. As for whether or not it was written under the instructions of Zhu Qizhan, who later became the emperor, no one knew. Hearing this, Zhou Xiang carefully raised his head. Reporting to the emperor, this official's qualifications are low. Should I ask Minister Xie to come out and preside over such a big matter? Whether or not there is a problem with Xie Chong is still being investigated. He absolutely cannot be released. What's wrong, Minister Zhou? Are you not confident in your own abilities? Or are you saying that you don't want to share the burden of the great Ming dynasty? Seeing that Zhu Qizhan was about to get angry, how could Zhou Xiang dare to say no? He immediately kowtowed and said, "This subject is willing to share the worries of your majesty and the great Ming dynasty. Tomorrow I will lead a team to Bugnam of Gojoseon for peace talks." Zhou Xiang knew that it was difficult, but he was even more clear that if he did not agree now, he was afraid that his head would fall to the ground immediately. This attitude made Zhu Qizhan's expression much better. After that, he no longer looked at Zhou Xiang. Instead, he looked at Mao Mu and said, "Minister Mao, the embroidered uniform guard must arrange for people to protect this matter." Furthermore, the front lines had suffered consecutive defeats. Perhaps the people's hearts were now unstable, and some people might take this opportunity to threaten the great Ming dynasty. We, the embroidered uniform guards, must take action. We won't allow any villains to stir up trouble. Also, arrest Guan Ying's family members. Throw them in jail, put them on trial and behead them after autumn. This subject obeys, Mao Mu said without any change in expression. Then he glanced at Zhou Xiang, who was kneeling on the ground and trembling with fear. He knew that it was impossible to negotiate now. This was just Zhu Qizhan's wishful thinking. As Yang Qindong's spy in the southern Ming Empire, he needed to do more things to show his ability and extraordinariness when he saw that the matter was about to be completed. After Zhu Qizhan waved his hand, Mao Mu and Zhou Xiang left Qingjing Hall. Then Mao Mu left the palace and went straight to the embroidered uniform guard's yamen. He thought that it was time to have a good talk with Shen Nantang and the others. The current embroidered uniform guard was in Mao Mu's hands. It was just like when Chao Jixiang controlled the embroidered uniform guard. However, the difference was that he no longer had any external enemies. Not only did the emperor and empress trust him, but even the entire group of eunuchs did not dare to oppose him. His current power was comparable to Wang Zhen's in the past. When the embroidered uniform guard learned that Mao Mu had come, Shen Nantang, Wu Ben, and Luo Zhu also came to the secret room. "Greetings, master." After the three of them entered, they noticed that there were two unfamiliar men standing behind Mao Mu. Based on their experience, they felt that these two people must be skilled martial artists. They couldn't help but feel a little nervous. They carefully recalled what they had done recently. It seemed that there was no situation where they disobeyed orders. Only then did their complexions become much better. "You're all here. Hand over your sabers." Mao Mu's gaze swept over Shen Nantang and the others before he opened his mouth to speak. When they heard that they had to hand over their sabers, they saw the two fierce warriors standing behind Mao Mu. Wu Ben's instinctive reaction was to not hand it over. This was clearly to deal with him. Although he had been very obedient and had not done anything to let Mao Mu down, he still wanted to resist. Shen Nantang and Luo Zhu did not say anything. Even their expressions did not change. They happily took off the spring-embroidered sabers from their waists and handed them over to the two strong men who walked over. They were originally scapegoats. If it wasn't for Mao Mu, they would probably have died in prison. Even their lives were given by him. What else was there to be afraid of? As long as it was Mao Mu's words, they would obey. This was because in their eyes, Mao Mu was their savior and their talent scout. Wu Ben only hesitated for a moment before he saw Shen Nantang and Luo Zhu obediently hand over their sabers. Only then did he come to his senses and hurriedly take off his saber. However, this moment of hesitation had already fallen into Mao Mu's eyes. Previously, he was still worried about who to appoint as the commander of the embroidered uniform guard. Now he had made a decision. "The three of you, how have I treated you?" Mao Mu decided to get straight to the point. In front of his subordinates, there was no need to hide things. Wouldn't that make him seem ungenerous? Master, your kindness to us is as heavy as a mountain. You are like a second parent to us. If you have any orders, even if it is a mountain of swords or a sea of flames, we will not frown. This time the three of them spoke in unison. Good, I am very gratified. Let me ask you. Now that the southern Ming dynasty has been defeated, the five-star army is bearing down on us. What do the three of you think? Mao Mu picked up a cup of tea from the table and slowly drank it. This turn of events was a bit big. For a moment, Shen Nantang and the others didn't immediately speak. Instead, they thought to themselves, what did Mao Mu mean by this? Could it be that the army had been defeated and he wanted to transfer them to the army? If there was such a possibility, wasn't the Imperial Horse Directorate in charge of this matter? And the head eunuch there was Mao Mu's subordinate, Zhang Chen. Wouldn't it be a simple matter to arrange for them to be transferred to the army? If it was before, it would be a good thing to be able to temper themselves in the army. After all, the embroidered uniform guard's reputation wasn't too good. If they could be transferred to the army, they might actually have a chance to stand in the imperial court and become an important official. This was something that the shameful embroidered uniform guard officials couldn't do. But now it was clear that the army wasn't enough. Entering there was no difference between sending them to their deaths. Those who had the ability were all thinking of how to jump out of the army. Who would take the initiative to enter? Thinking of this, the three people's faces turned ugly. They knew that if Mao Mu really had such intentions, they would have to go regardless of whether they were willing or not. Well, why aren't you replying? Say whatever you want to say in front of me. I'll forgive you. Mao Mu saw that a while had passed and the three people still didn't speak, so he pretended to be unhappy. With Mao Mu's reminder, the three people didn't dare to remain silent. Shen Nantang was the first to speak. The five-star army is full of vigor. They are all elites who have been through hundreds of battles. In comparison, our southern Ming army is all new recruits. If we fight on the battlefield, I'm afraid that we will lose more than we will win. Yes. Mao Mu nodded. Although Shen Nantang's words were tactful, Mao Mu could tell that he didn't think highly of the southern Ming army. On the contrary, he thought that the five-star army would win. This answer made him very satisfied. This was a person he could rope in. I agree with Shin Tongji's opinion. The southern Ming army is probably not a match for the five-star army. Luo Zhu immediately expressed his opinion. Mao Mu didn't respond this time. Instead, his gaze fell on Wu Ben. At this moment, Wu Ben's mood was somewhat conflicted. After all, he was now a member of the southern Ming Imperial Guard. Logically speaking, he shouldn't speak on this kind of matter. Even if he spoke, he shouldn't say anything discouraging. However, Mao Mu had to ask. Moreover, Shen Nantang and Luo Zhu both responded. He knew that he had to say something. Yes. Reporting to Factory Master, this lowly one thinks that it will be very difficult for the southern Ming army to win this battle. Wu Ben finally spoke. Although it was a bit forced, he also expressed that he didn't think highly of the southern Ming army. This made Mao Mu feel relieved. He finally made a decision. Good. The three of you listen to my orders. Shen Nantang will be promoted to commander of the Imperial Guard, a primary third-rank official. Luo Zhu will be promoted to Commander Tongji, secondary third-rank official. As for Wu Ben, you can go to the army and temporarily be the deputy commander of the Capital Guard, also a primary third-rank official. This subordinate thanks Factory Master. Shen Nantang and Luo Zhu were both in high spirits. The two of them finally got what they wanted. Their official positions were also promoted. At this moment, their hearts were filled with excitement and excitement. On the other hand, although Wu Ben's official position was promoted, he was kicked out of the Imperial Guard. As for going to the Capital Guard, who didn't know that the commander there was the Emperor's trusted aide? He was also the general of the Imperial Guard, Fan Zhong. If he went to be a deputy commander, how could he have any power? He hated himself for not performing well just now. However, it was useless to say anything now. An arm couldn't twist a leg. Moreover, Mao Mu had saved his life. He couldn't betray him. Therefore, although he was unhappy, he still replied, "This subordinate thanks Factory Master." Good. Commander Shin and Luo Zhu can go first. Deputy Commander Wu can stay behind. Mao Mu said with a smile. Chapter 1695. Yes. Shen Nantang and Shen Nantang hurriedly left. Only Mao Mu's group of 4 remained in the secret room. When there was no one else around, Mao Mu finally spoke. Wu Ben, do you hate me? No, this subordinate definitely does not have such intentions. Without Factory Master, Wu Ben would be a dead man by now. The grace of saving my life is equivalent to giving me a new lease of life. No matter what factory master wants this subordinate to do, this subordinate is willing to do it. Wu Ben hurriedly waved his hands as he explained. However, these words were not false. When he handed over his saber, it was merely an instinctive reaction. He did not intend to resist, nor did he intend to harm Mao Mu. Yes, this duke understands your intentions. This duke also knows that you want to become the commander of the embroidered uniform guard to prove yourself, Mao Mu said with a smile. When these words entered Wu Ben's ears, his eyes involuntarily widened. There is no need to look at this duke like that. This duke has been in the imperial palace for many years and is most proficient at observing others. If you truly had disloyalty, would you still be standing here now? Mao Mu's voice suddenly rose as he spoke, causing Wu Ben to sweat profusely. He was also rejoicing that he did not have any disloyalty. Otherwise he would have become a corpse by now. Wu Ben's performance fell into Mao Mu's eyes. This made him even more certain that he did not use the wrong person. He continued, Wu Ben, you are not the same as Shin Nantang. He is extremely obedient. As long as it is an order from this duke, regardless of whether it is right or wrong, he will do his best to carry it out. As for you, you have your own thoughts. Although you will do many things according to my orders, you will always ask yourself why. Is this duke right? This subordinate knows his mistake. More cold sweat appeared on Wu Ben's forehead. However, Mao Mu did not care about this. Instead, he continued, it is because of your willingness to think that this duke has decided to hand over the important matters to you. However, I do not know if you have the ability or the courage to do it well. This subordinate will listen to factory master's words and will not hesitate to go through water and tread on fire. In order to express his decision, Wu Ben knelt down on the ground as he spoke. Fine, since that's the case, I'll be frank with you. Sending you to the capital guard this time is not to send you away, but to give you a great opportunity. Whether or not you can seize the opportunity will depend on your ability. As for the mission, it's to replace Fan Zhong as the commander. What? Even though Wu Ben was somewhat prepared, he was still shocked by this sentence. Who was Fan Zhong? That was because he had followed Ying Zong through the Tuma Castle incident and had been protecting him all the way until today. It could be said that he was the person Zhu Qizhen trusted the most. Otherwise, why would he be given such an important position as the commander of the capital guards? On the other hand, he was just a member of the embroidered uniform guard with a dishonorable background. Now he was actually being asked to replace him. Was this even possible? If these words were said by someone else, Wu Ben would have thought that the person was crazy. But since it was Mao Mu who said it, he wouldn't doubt it. He just didn't believe in his own ability. Wu Ben having such a reaction was completely within Mao Mu's expectations. What, do you have no confidence in yourself or in me? Your subordinate has no confidence in myself, Wu Ben said truthfully. No matter, with my support and a large sum of money to pave the way, there's nothing that can't be done. Have you forgotten whether it's Chen Xingbao or Kai Zhong? What kind of status did they have? Didn't they all fall? Since that's the case, why can't Fan Zhong fall? Mao Mu said in a tempting manner, the smile on his face growing wider and wider. Wu Ben looked as if he had been struck by lightning, his eyes widening in an instant. Are you saying, that's right, in order for you to obtain this position, the guild will use all means to help you. During this time you can try to rope in other people. However much silver you need, I'll give you. In short, you just need to control the capital guard before Fan Zhong falls from power. Mao Mu finally told Wu Ben the general plan. However, for safety's sake, he didn't say that he was already Bugnam of Gojoseon's man. This matter was too big, unless it was absolutely necessary he couldn't announce it. Wu Ben finally understood that the factory master wanted to extend his hand to the military. Although he didn't know why Mao Mu wanted to do this, since this mission was assigned to him, he just needed to do his best. Alright, your subordinate will do his best to complete this mission. Ah, you really didn't disappoint me. How about this, these two people behind me will follow you. If you encounter any danger, they will lend a helping hand. You can do whatever you want, they won't stop you, Mao Mu said as he pointed at the two elite special forces members behind him. They were both experts in action, specially assigned to Mao Mu by the captain, Tai Hu, to help him complete his mission. Wu Ben naturally saw that these two people were mainly here to monitor him. After all, this matter was too big, no one could be completely at ease. If Mao Mu didn't have any countermeasures, then he would be apprehensive. Since he knew the purpose of these two people's visit, Wu Ben naturally wouldn't refuse, nor could he refuse. He said, "Thank you for your understanding, factory master. Your subordinate will get along well with these two brothers. Very good. With this matter accomplished, Mao Mu's heart was put down. Interfering with the capital guard was one of the main tasks that Yang Qindong arranged for him. Previously he always felt that the time wasn't right. Now that the South Ming army had been defeated, some opportunities had appeared, and he could grasp them tightly. The reason why he arranged for Wu Ben to enter the capital guard now was to make use of the time difference. This was because only when the frontline army was defeated, would he arrange for people to enter the capital guard and not make Commander Fan Zhong feel disgusted. This was because there were too many people who surrendered at the front line. Even Guanyin had surrendered to the 5-star army. The emperor must have arranged for the embroidered uniform guards to monitor him. That was why he accepted them and didn't think too much about it. Fan Zhong was a person who would never surrender, so he didn't feel disgusted or think too much about it. If it were anyone else, they definitely wouldn't agree to having a deputy by their side in the midst of a great battle. They might even take the opportunity to make a fuss. The matter was just as Mao Mu had thought. At this time, Wu Ben appeared in the capital guard and took up the post with an internal affairs report from the Imperial Horse Directorate. As expected, Fan Zhong's thoughts went astray. In the future, the emperor was worried that the army wouldn't be under his control, so he used a conventional method. Thus, not only did he accept Wu Ben's appointment as deputy commander, he didn't report this matter to the emperor. What should he write in the report? Ask what? As for Zhu Qizhen, of course, he didn't know that he already had a deputy commander in the capital guard. Even if he knew, Mao Mu would explain that it was to better watch over the army. Of course, Zhu Qizhen wasn't so easy to fool. Without ordering the embroidered uniform guards to arrange people in such an important unit like the capital guard, who knew if he would think too much about it? This was why he secretly did things. Now it seemed that Mao Mu had made the right bet. Wu Ben's matter didn't attract anyone's attention. This played an important role in taking over the capital guard. Guangzhou Prefecture. Guanyin and his group were sent back here. The first thing Yu Mian did was to visit the small courtyard where they were locked up. At this time, Guanyin no longer had his previous high-spirited appearance. Instead he looked dejected. Before the war he still had aspirations. Although he knew that the 5-star army was very strong with the geographical advantage and numbers advantage, it wasn't certain that they would lose. But after the real battle, he realized that the 5-star army's strength was far beyond his expectations. They couldn't even be described as an army. It was more appropriate to call them a human meat grinder. They had heavy firearms that no one dared to imagine, and they also had mobility that was faster than a warhorse. They were also a group of elites that had experienced life and death on the battlefield. Such an opponent should not exist in this world. Such an opponent, not to mention him, even the strongest army since the Han Dynasty wouldn't be a match for them. Losing to such a person wasn't shameful at all. That was why he gave the order for the entire army to surrender. Guanyin was a talent that Kuang Yi valued. His military ability was very good and his commanding ability was also very strong. But knowing that they would lose, he couldn't make his brothers fight with their lives on the line. This was also why Yu Mian appeared before him. If not, with Yang Qindong's temper, Guanyin would have been locked up and forced to do hard labor until he died. It was also because Guanyin was able to see the big picture and knew how precious the lives of Han soldiers were that Yu Mian gave him a chance. Naturally, there was only one chance. If he couldn't grasp it, then he couldn't blame anyone else. When Yu Mian arrived, he immediately explained Yang Qindong's intentions to Guanyin. General Guan, it's true that you're a talent. In the Southern Ming army you're one of the best. But in the Yangxia army you're really nothing much. Bugnam of Gojoseon's subordinates are all generals who have experienced countless battles. We don't lack talents in this field. This time, it's because you're able to see the big picture and didn't let the Han army suffer more losses that I'm giving you a chance to redeem yourself. You must understand. Yu Mian's meaning was very clear. This time I'm not here to beg you but to give you a chance. If you don't want to be captured then that's fine. We've dealt with more than 1 or 2 surrendered generals like you. We have plenty of ways. After hearing these words, Guanyin was completely stunned. His face was filled with confusion. This was the first time he had seen or heard of such a method of persuading someone to surrender. With his temper he really wanted to throw Yu Mian out to show that he was a strong-willed person. Chapter 1696. Without waiting for Guanyin to speak, Yu Mian continued, Right now, I have something to report to General Guan. This time, the Southern Ming Emperor already knows that you ordered the surrender of the army. Right now, your family has been captured by the embroidered uniform guards and is in the prison of the discipline prison. They may die at any time or be exiled or banished to the army. However, our Bugnam of Gojosian is virtuous. Seeing that you saved so many Han soldiers, we have already arranged for people to protect your family. However, whether they are safe or not will depend on your performance. Guan Ying, who was about to get angry and express his dissatisfaction and even use this to express his loyalty to the Southern Ming Empire, immediately shut his mouth. Right now he was obviously hated by Ying Zong. He could imagine how the history books would record him under the emperor's instructions. Although he believed that he did things with a clear conscience, sometimes rumors could really kill people. Even if you were dead, you would not be able to rest in peace. He had completely offended the Southern Ming Empire. If he offended Bugnam of Gojosian, then he would not be able to rest in peace even if he died. Right now he was worried about his family. If he wanted to say anything, he would have to think carefully. With this thought, Guan Ying's face became even uglier. From Yu Mian's words, he heard another meaning. That was, the current Yang Xie seemed to be able to extend his hand into the embroidered uniform guards. To exaggerate, he could even achieve the goal of controlling them. This was somewhat frightening. With the mistake he made, Ying Zong would definitely send the embroidered uniform guards to capture his family. However, under such circumstances, Bugnam of Gojosian still had the confidence to protect his family's lives. Didn't this mean that the embroidered uniform guards were no longer pure and were no longer the butcher's knife in Ying Zong's hand, where he could cut wherever he wanted? Considering that the Southern Ming Empire's capital was in an uproar about the arrest of officials, 4 out of 6 ministers were arrested, and many officials from various yamen were also arrested by the embroidered uniform guards. Previously he thought that it was because these people joined the observer group. Now it seemed that things were not so simple. Perhaps the embroidered uniform guards' actions were not only Ying Zong's idea, but also Bugnam of Gojosian's idea. Thinking about it, if those capable officials were all arrested, how could the Southern Ming dynasty not be in chaos? Even if they were newly promoted officials, would they be able to grasp the situation in such a short time? It turned out that Yang Xie's strength had already infiltrated to such a degree. It was laughable that these generals still wanted to repel the 5-star army on the front lines. Even if the other party did not have such powerful firearms, the officials behind them were not competent enough to guarantee that they would not be able to deliver the goods. In the end they would still fail. Thinking of this, Guan Ying's mood was no longer as heavy. He seemed to have already seen the scene of the Southern Ming Empire being defeated. He was just an appetizer before the defeat. Guan Ying, who knew that the Southern Ming Empire would become a force to be reckoned with without them, put down the burden in his heart. When he looked at Yu Mian, his tone became very polite as he said, "Thank you, Bugnam of Gojosian, for thinking highly of me. Since this is the case, Guan Ying would not dare to not work for you." Guan Ying had surrendered. This time he was not forced to surrender. He had truly surrendered to Yang Xie and the 5-star army. For this reason, Yang Qindong did not treat him unfairly. He directly gave him the title of Great General who pacifies the Southern Ming Empire. Not only did he find 50,000 veterans from the surrendered army for him to command, he also ordered him to be the vanguard, leading the charge from the Guangdong region to the Southern Ming Empire's capital, Fengtianfu. After Guan Ying surrendered, he was put in an important position. More importantly, he released a signal to the outside world that as long as people knew what was good for them, not only would they not suffer any losses, they might even be put in an important position. As a result, along the way, almost all of the state capitals that the army passed surrendered at the sight of the wind. All of the city capitals opened their doors early to welcome the 5-star army into the city. From the beginning of the 4th month in 1468, the war officially started. In just 3 months, the 5-star army's 3 armies passed through countless state capitals and finally arrived outside of Nanjing. Along the way, wherever the 5-star army passed by, other than leaving behind troops to guard the various cities, they did not harm the commoners at all. Even some of the local tyrants did not have the intention to make a move. It was as if they were allowed to exist. This also reduced the voices of resistance from all walks of life to the lowest. The common people did not have any objections to who became the emperor and who ruled them. Bugnam of Gojosian was also a Han. Since that was the case, why should they put their own lives on the line and fight to the death? The tyrants did not lose any benefits, so they pretended that they did not see anything. To them, as long as they could continue to benefit from it, it made no difference whether they called Yang Qindong Your Majesty or Zhu Qizhen Your Majesty. There was no need to talk about the officials. Those who had the ability were all captured by the imperial guards. The remaining people were those who had less experience. They did not enjoy much of the southern Ming Emperor's grace, so why should they risk their lives? Now that they could change their identities and become officials in the Yangtze, everyone's experience would be equal. This became a good thing. Only a fool would oppose it. Under the collision of many thoughts, this was the result. The five-star army smoothly approached and arrived in front of the southern Ming capital. They quickly surrounded the place. The capital guard. It was equivalent to the emperor's imperial guards and was the most elite existence in the southern Ming army. Fan Zhong, this general who had followed Zhu Qizhan for more than 20 years, was now over 50 years old. He gave people the feeling that he was old. However, in reality he was diligent in training. Even now he could eat 5 caddies of meat, drink half a jar of old wine, and wield the 40 caddies of broadsword like a tiger. Fan Zhong never embezzled the soldiers' rations. Based on his relationship with the emperor's trust, he had obtained many benefits for the Jingdo Guard. This caused the atmosphere of this troop to be quite good, and their training had not been neglected. This also became the only troop in the South Ming army that had the most combat power and one of Zhu Qizhan's greatest supporters. However, all of this changed with the arrival of Wu Ben, the deputy commander. Wu Ben had come with orders and a large sum of money. After he entered the capital guard, other than showing respect to Fan Zhong on the surface, he used money to rope in the capital guard's officers. The attraction of banknotes was very strong. Especially for these martial artists in the army, they did not have as much gray income as the corrupt officials. Under Fan Zhong's watch, they did not dare to embezzle money like the other generals in the southern Ming army. They only relied on the limited amount of money they received every month. Their living standards had always been very low and even a bit miserable. As the southern Ming and Yangtze became hostile, the price of food began to rise. Relying on the money from before was not enough to feed a family. Because of this, the officers at all levels were unable to do anything. It was at this time that Wu Ben appeared. A large amount of banknotes was given out from his hands. Whenever he knew someone's family was in trouble, he would help without any compensation. This caused him to obtain the love and respect of the capital guard in a very short period of time. He became the #1 person after Fan Zhong. Privately, many soldiers were discussing that it would be better for Wu Ben to be their commander than for Fan Zhong to be their commander. It could be said that they only lacked an opportunity to replace him. At first, Fan Zhong did not know about all of this. Later, some of the soldiers loyal to him began to respond to him. He found out a bit, but he did not stop them. In his opinion, it was a good thing to be able to solve the problems of the soldiers, so he should not stop them. Later on, when Fan Zhong found that everyone looked at Wu Ben with more respect than they looked at him, he finally felt that the situation was not good. Soon after, he ordered people to invite Wu Ben to his manor and used official business as an excuse to ask him to come. This was clearly going to make a move. Fan Zhong was afraid that his power would be taken away, so he had to take measures. If it was 3 months ago, Wu Ben would naturally be afraid. But now, at least 90% of the Jingdo Guard officers had received his kindness. Now he was truly not afraid of what Fan Zhong would do to him. He was not afraid, but he still had to be prepared. First, he reported the matter to Mao Mu. After giving him a night's time to prepare, early the next morning, Wu Ben brought the 2 bodyguards, who followed him closely other than when he was sleeping, to the Fan Manor. Just as Wu Ben expected, Fan Zhong was prepared to get rid of Wu Ben. He believed that given his friendship with the emperor, even if he really killed Wu Ben, the emperor would not do anything to him. Thus, he had made sufficient preparations. He had arranged for 100 of his best soldiers to lie in ambush in the manor. They would only need to wait for him to break his cup to act. At this time, Fan Zhong was still making mistakes. He still wanted to persuade Wu Ben to withdraw from the Jingdo Guard and return the army to his hands. It had to be said that Fan Zhong was not ruthless enough. This doomed him to a tragic end. In the Fan Manor, the servants had already prepared food and wine in advance. Fan Zhong and Wu Ben sat across from each other. They chatted as they ate. At the beginning it was Fan Zhong who spoke while Wu Ben listened. Most of the time he spoke in a gentle tone. Fan Zhong also wanted to persuade the other party to retreat in the face of difficulties. It would be best if they did not use weapons. In order to give eunuch Mao Mu enough time to prepare his plans, Wu Ben pretended to listen attentively. Just like this, more than an hour passed. Fan Zhong had also earnestly spoken for half a day. Everything had been laid out. Finally, it was time to express his position. Deputy Commander Wu, You are indeed a capable person. Perhaps you have also received the Emperor's trust. However, I still have to say that when I was serving the Emperor, you were probably not even born yet. If you really do expose some matters to the Emperor, I guarantee that the one who will suffer in the end will be you. Stop. This is a banknote worth 50,000 liang. Take it and be a good deputy commander. In the future, just eat, drink, and play. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.